areas could see 5 feet of storm surge. So going to get the potential for flooding from inland and from the coast as well. So let's take a look now at the wind and the waves and the likely arrival time of winds that you're not going to want to be out working in, getting your final preparations done. So you're going to want to have everything done well before this, because by Sunday morning, you're going to be in it for a huge portion of the Northeast. And that's when you're going to see coastal areas at 8 o'clock in the morning, roughly, with tropical storm force winds. Now, it won't be the whole extent of the coast, but exactly where, again, where it makes landfall is going to be, still needs to be worked out. But, you know, somewhere in here looks like the prime candidate, but we can't rule out over here yet. That's just something that will reveal itself in the next 24 and definitely the next 36 hours. So by 8 o'clock tomorrow night, we're going to have a really good idea of where this is going and how strong it's going to be. Now, it's likely to get up to hurricane strength. And then how strong of a hurricane, of course, will depend, once it gets over the cooler waters, how much it ratchets us down to, you know, a slightly weaker but still formidable storm by Sunday morning. When well ahead of the storm, the waves are going to start picking up. It's going to be dangerous to be in the water. But then the surge, the possible heavy rain flood threat is going to be with us, and the wind as well. So several hours, perhaps parts of Long Island will be in this. Portions, especially coastal Connecticut and Rhode Island, will be in this, getting the brunt of what Henri is going to bring. At least, again, that is the existing forecast. But we've been watching the forecast change throughout the whole week. We went from, good thing this is heading out of here, to, uh-oh, it's heading into land. And that looks more like the real possibility here. Just how far to the west does it end up, or do we start to see it go back to the east? Regardless, storm surge watches in effect for these coastal areas, and we could see potentially on the low end 1 to 3 foot rises, on the higher end up to 5 feet, Molly. So still a lot needs to be worked out, but be ready for it all.
Well, as Henri approaches people in New England, you've got to be thinking about the scenes that you saw almost exactly 1 year ago. You can hear the screams. That's when Isaias tore a path through the Northeast and tore down thousands of trees in the process. First, the storm saturated the ground with pounding rain, and then it delivered the second blow, knocking down those weakened trees and wet roots with strong winds. And of course, that is a fear as we're looking at Henri approaching New England. A lot of very tall, beautiful tree canopies in this area, but we've seen a lot of recent rainfall, so we do have some saturated ground and some weakened roots and some stronger winds on the horizon. Let's look back at some of the recent impactful storms in New England. Of course, we have Isaias, which we just saw video from, that happened about this time last year. And then in recent time frame, we're talking about Faye as well as Sandy back in 2012. That was post-tropical as it made landfall. But we want to switch over to where we saw some hurricanes, and when we saw some hurricanes making landfall in New England. The most recent one, and I think this is important and very interesting, is it was 30 years ago. It was Hurricane Bob that made landfall in Rhode Island. That was 30 years ago, and actually the anniversary of that was yesterday. So we have seen hurricanes in New England. It has just been a really long time since we've seen that level of tropical systems directly make landfall. Certainly you felt impacts from others passing through, and most recently we felt the impacts of the remnants of Fred, and that happened just yesterday. But Chris, here we go. We have Henri on the horizon, and with those two together, flash flooding concerns are very high.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, a lot of people out on Long Island as well, a lot of vacationers. And as Molly mentioned, a lot of people still out of school. So hoping for fun times, unfortunately, likely to get some stormy times. And that means, of course, the potential for some dangerous times. So 70 mile per hour, that's new as of the 2 o'clock advisory, up in strength, which means often, and in this case is the case, down in pressure, down to 994 millibars. And that's the relationship. As the pressure drops, the winds go up. So that's an intensifying storm. So we'll watch and see how strong it gets as it moves to the north. Again, we're talking about possible landfall, more likely expected landfall now, really, for the Northeast and New England. And look where it is right now. It's almost due east of Jacksonville, Florida. So we got to go all the way up the eastern seaboard, and there's going to be favorable conditions for development. So we'll see. I'm very interested to see tomorrow morning how strong this storm is going to be as it continues its expected track up to the north and then eventually into the northeast. By Sunday morning, we're going to be in it, I think. Even some areas, especially coastal areas, you're going to notice the surf going up, but parts of New Jersey. Again, the possible track for this, the forecast is right here, but this is the error cone. So based on history, we've seen the storms go anywhere in here, and a third of the time, it goes outside of the cone. So the center could still go like this, and there's still a chance the center still goes like this. So from Cape Cod to New Jersey, you need to pay attention to the forecast as these watches and are likely to change into warnings for some areas. They're hurricane watches, tropical storm watches, likely to expand, possibly in coverage, and even in northern extent as well. Can't rule that out. So stay with the Weather Channel, and you can download our app on your TV. Our coverage is also available on Roku, Fire Stick, and on your smart TV.
When you order... Evacuate immediately.
Oh no. Go, go! I'm on!
Named the world's most accurate forecaster, the Weather Channel.
And on the Weather Channel right now, looking at a wet mess in Massachusetts after Fred left a whole lot of rain to drain through the city streets here in Boston. Residents left only to watch their recycling bins going for a bit of a ride in the water as the streets filled up with too much rain too fast. Today, families there trying to dry out the best you can ahead of what is the next rainmaker, Henri. And it, too, could bring some very heavy tropical rain to the northeast. Tropical storm conditions possible for parts of Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, and New Jersey. Possibly all. Can't rule that out here. As we look at the very latest, as of the 2 o'clock advisory from the National Hurricane Center here on the Weather Channel, as we're tracking Henri. 70 mile per hour, so we're just a few miles away. The next one, if you get stronger than 74, it's going to be a hurricane, and so we're getting close to that. The trend has been a stronger storm, the pressure down to 994 millibars. Moving to the north-northwest, so keeping that trek and that track going more of a northerly track eventually by late Saturday going into Sunday, when it's expected to be a hurricane, again, just making it up to getting the name of a hurricane, becoming a hurricane by Sunday morning, likely overnight Saturday, maybe earlier. And again, the earlier, Molly, it becomes a hurricane, the more likely it has a better chance of staying stronger as it gets to land.
Well, the time to prepare is now. When you see a cloud this ominous, you know it's a sign of wicked weather to come. Check out this massive cloud that covered the skies of Elbert County, Colorado on Thursday during a round of severe storms. Things got pretty nasty in parts of the Centennial State with 2-inch hail to more than 7 inches of rain in a few spots. As we look ahead to the rest of today and tonight, even more severe weather is possible as we track new round of storms potentially headed your way. Let's check out where it's raining right now, and that's in portions of South Dakota, pushing towards the Sioux Falls area, a little bit away, but you do have some rain and some thunderstorms heading in your direction, and some stronger thunderstorms right now across Minnesota, where we do have a severe thunderstorm warning with a lot of lightning, a lot of very heavy rain, and we'll continue to watch the severe weather just kind of blossom across this area. There's a lot of moisture, a lot of energy to work with ahead of this system, and we could potentially see some isolated spin-up tornadoes as well. We have a Torcon of 3 out of 10, not an enormous threat, but certainly not zero. And this very same system, there were some reported tornadoes yesterday as well in Colorado. So let's push this into the future. Not only will we see these storms start to fire up, but also we'll we're going to see them form a giant line through the overnight hours. Anytime we see summertime storms, typically they can sustain themselves through the overnight hours because those low-level winds pick up after the sun goes down, and it allows lines like this to form, bringing some very, very damaging winds to areas like Des Moines all the way down to Kansas City, and potentially even into portions of southeastern Kansas as we go into very early tomorrow morning, and even bringing rain very early on Saturday morning. That's 5 a.m. local time to areas like St. Louis all the way up into northern Illinois. So a lot to watch with this severe weather threat evolving over the next few hours. Chris?
And we're going to watch it develop in the middle of the country, and we're going to be watching you Omaha, where it's hot right now, and it's been a little gusty too, up to 35 miles an hour. We're expecting storms to get going later on this evening into tonight, and that storm threat for parts of the Midwest, and that storm threat will be picking up again late this weekend. So let's start off with the weekend forecast in Omaha, and tomorrow's looking pretty good. After we get through tonight, looking pretty good. Next chance for storms will be the day after tomorrow. By Sunday night, another chance for some thunderstorms. Here's the timing for this tomorrow morning through the day. Storms going through Illinois and Wisconsin early in the morning and afternoon, and then as the day turns into night, so there goes your break for the plains. From Nebraska to North Dakota, could start out a bit bumpy on Sunday morning, with storms continuing to move into Minnesota during the evening and nighttime hours, and then there through central and eastern Nebraska, also late evening and into the nighttime on Sunday. That threat on Sunday that the storms are going to turn severe, be of the stronger variety, is here. These areas right here in red is where it's possible we'll have severe thunderstorms. And the thunderstorms are going to bring quite a bit of rain. Now, a lot of this rain is needed. And this time of year during the summer months, it's quite often the thunderstorms that bring a lot of the rain you get here. So a lot of areas in drought, as you see right here. Exceptional drought that you can see right up here is the most intense form of drought. That's the highest category of drought. So every little raindrop that we can get here, Molly, is very much needed.
Certainly is. It's time now for our great weekend destination. And what better place to take a weekend trip than to San Diego? It looks beautiful right now. It's in the 70s. Temperatures climbing into the 80s this afternoon. It'll be much of the same as we go throughout the weekend with those cool, comfortable mornings in the 60s. And then in the afternoon, both Saturday and Sunday, we're climbing into the 80s with a lot of sunshine, as you would expect, San Diego. If you are in Massachusetts right now, you've got to be concerned about this forecast because you still haven't had a chance to dry out from the absolute drenching you got from Fred. And now here comes Henri. Car rides turned into water rides on Thursday when flash floods from Fred dropped as much as 3 inches of standing water on some streets. And Henri is expected to be yet another rainmaker. You're taking a live look at Montauk, New York this afternoon, where a hurricane watch is in effect as we track the path of Henri. Particular concern to people here on Long Island is the potential storm surge, which could send water as high as 4 feet above ground in surge-prone areas this weekend. And also a recent tweet from PSE&G Long Island stating that given the potential intensity that they're expecting here in Long Island, that some of the outages could last 7 to 10 days. So they're really encouraging people to prep your homes and your businesses now, because today really is the day. That's why there are watches out for Long Island. Hurricane watches for a significant portion of Long Island. It also includes New Haven, New London, Newport, all the way into Cape Cod. That's where we're expecting the impacts initially as Tropical Storm Henri continues to churn to the north, and it has made that northerly turn. Yesterday it was moving to the west, now it's moving to the north. A big reason for that is yesterday we were watching a huge area of high pressure. It was actually starting to shear some of the northern part of Henri, but now that high pressure is starting to relax. Not only is that allowing this to strengthen just a little bit, but it's also allowing for that northerly turn. The wind speeds up to 70 miles per hour, and looking more impressive and even larger on satellite right now. We do have some pretty intense thunderstorms going on in the center of Henri, and certainly that indicates that we could be seeing some gradual strengthening underway. Now, one thing that does work in our favor, Chris, is that we do have some cooler water, relatively cooler, just to the south of New England, that could help bring down the intensity just a little bit, prior to landfall.
Yeah, so that's one going for us. Hopefully that will end up being the case here, but we got to be ready because there will be, no matter what, some very heavy rain. In some areas will get clocked with some tropical storm winds at the very least, so continue to watch the forecast and the movement of this storm from New Jersey to Connecticut, of course, New York and Boston and Rhode Island. The storm's heading your way. It is expected, again, to strengthen to a hurricane, but how much weakening will happen, that remains to be seen before it makes landfall. Heavy rain is certainly expected for a lot of the Northeast, with pockets getting possibly more than 5 inches of rain, which means there could possibly be some dangerous and even destructive flash flooding out of all of this. And as we're tracking Henri here at the Weather Channel, the rainfall will be one of the big stories. And if you were in the Boston area and you were in one of the areas where your home flooded or the streets flooded, you certainly know what tropical systems are able to do here just this week. This is the European forecast model tomorrow through Tuesday. So with the meat of the storm, it's showing some areas. Again, I wouldn't take this to be exactly where it's going to end up, but this is where it's possibly going to end up. Let's take a look now at the American model, the GFS. Now, there's a little bit of an overlap, but notice this has some orange in it. So essentially, it looks like it shifts it this way, the main swath, and also saying, hey, this could be a juicier one than the European is showing us in this range, the orange range, which is more than 5 inches of rain. And anytime there's a tropical system, you're going to hear us say locally higher amounts. So numbers that are beyond the forecast, always a possibility. Flash flooding from the Delmarva tomorrow into Sunday, then Sunday into Monday from Atlantic City all the way up to Portland, Maine. Be ready for the rain. Molly?
Well, Chris, it's not just the rain, it's also the storm surge that we're watching. And as we watch Henri intensify, that also brings in the wind threat. I do want to start with the storm surge because we have a significant area under a storm surge watch that does include Long Island, the Long Island Sound, coastal Connecticut, coastal Rhode Island, a lot of areas that are very storm surge prone and very vulnerable to storm surge. That also does include Cape Cod as well as Martha's Vineyard and the Nantucket Sound. So we're looking at areas that we could see at worst 3 to 5 feet of storm surge moving in to normally dry ground. And on top of that, this could coincide with high tide. It just depends on exactly when this makes landfall. But we also have a full moon on Sunday as well. So a lot of factors here at play that could bring the water levels up just a little bit higher. And that certainly would lend to some more problems. So the time, we can't stress this enough, the time to prepare really is today and at least the first half of tomorrow, because we could see those tropical storm force winds and some of those outer bands with some very heavy rain starting to move in late Saturday into early Sunday, and then continuing as we go throughout the day on Sunday to go downhill as we watch that approaching landfall from Henri in New England. Visible.
New video into the Weather Channel right now, out ahead of Henri. And boaters off the Massachusetts coast getting ready for the storm. You got to get your vessel out of the water. That's the best thing you can do. These recreational boaters and some anglers as well spent the day west of Dennis tying up their boats or getting them out of the water here. And of course, that's always good advice here. And tie down anything else, even if it's not in the water. Say it's a kayak or some other thing that's susceptible to being blown away. Just keep that in mind as well. Might need a little bit more than just a safe harbor with this, depending on where you are. So heavy rain is going to be, I think, the biggest concern once you get away from the coast. Going to have still some very strong winds with some saturated ground, which may make it easier for some of the trees to topple. But the heavy rain and flood threat is a big one here. We've seen a lot of rain over the past couple of days. Next couple of days, we're going to see a lot more rain. So it's the combination of the two that just makes it even worse. Just the rain that's going to come could cause some flash flooding. But again, that much worse knowing that it has been wet lately. You can think of it as a sponge that's already got water in it. It's only going to take so much more before the water just goes right off of the sponge. Here's the forecast and the forecast uncertainty. So here's the forecast right here. And the error based on history. So how wrong has the forecast been in the past? Well, at this point in time, it's been wrong by this much. And you can really think of it actually as a circle. But at this point, it's been wrong by this much. And we know later in time, the harder the forecast, that's why it gets bigger. But you can see it looks likely somewhere from here to here will have landfall, with the most likely, at least at this point, the forecast in Connecticut or Rhode Island, Molly.
Well, it's not just New England, as well as the Northeast watching some flooding. A Georgia daycare rather, is closed today after flooding forced fire crews to save 27 children and 4 staff members. This happened in Austell in the Atlanta area yesterday. You could see firefighters wading through knee-deep water in the parking lot outside. Storms dropped nearly 3 inches in a matter of hours for the hardest hit areas of the neighborhoods in metro Atlanta. We saw a lot of rain in many of these areas. Well, parts of the Carolinas also trying to dry out from Fred. 2 people are dead after high waters swept through Haywood County, North Carolina. That's just west of Asheville. Haywood County Emergency Services now saying 7 people remain missing at this time. Meanwhile, Henri is sending dangerous swells toward the Carolina coast. So if you're trying to fit in that last-minute summer vacation before the kids go back to school, I know a lot of kids have gone back to school in the Southeast, but maybe trying to vacation on some of the beaches, the beautiful beaches in South Carolina as well as North Carolina. There is a rip current threat today, and it's fairly high because here is Henri just kind of swirling down here. And then we have some very strong onshore flow that's happening as Henri will just skirt past the coasts of the Carolinas. That'll be the biggest impact, is the rough surf and the rip currents that you see from Henri in the Carolinas, just passing a little uncomfortably close for a lot of these areas. Otherwise, in the Southeast, we're going to see another stormy day where we have those pop-up showers and thunderstorms, some stronger thunderstorms possible, very slow moving. Once again, just like what we saw yesterday, anytime that you see a slow-moving thunderstorm, you have to think flash flooding, because these summer downpours can drop a lot of rain in a short amount of time. Potentially a very stormy Monday, Saturday. We're going into the weekend as we go across Tennessee, Nashville, potentially seeing a lot of that rain early on Saturday before that dives into areas like Alabama, all the way down to Atlanta, and even some portions of southern Alabama and Georgia as we go throughout the first part of the weekend. Because of that, yes, we've seen a lot of rain lately. We're going to see even more, and some spots that we could pick up an additional 1 to 2 inches of rain, but it's very likely that we'll see some locally higher amounts. So that means Nashville, taking a look at your forecast, you'll see hit or miss storms as we go throughout this afternoon. Very likely to start off Saturday morning stormy, and that will continue throughout the first part of Saturday. Chris?
All right, Molly, I want to take you now to the Midwest as we turn our attention to some more severe weather possible from the Great Lakes to the plains here. And right now, it's hot and a nice day to be on the water. How about that here? It's 89 degrees, feels like 93. You know what? The flags are moving a little bit, and just a little bit of wind goes a long way in comfort levels to help just cool you a little bit. I mean, you notice it when the air starts moving, when it's hot outside for sure. It's hot and juicy in the middle part of the U.S., which leads to an unstable atmosphere. And then all the atmosphere needs is a little bit of a nudge to get that hot and humid air going up into a colder environment to a point where it continues to rise on its own, releasing a lot of heat and a lot of moisture and getting some big-time storms. And that's what's possible. We're seeing that flare up here. You can see all that energy right through here. So this is going to be the prime area for some of the stronger storms, which eventually and possibly could be tornadic. Tornadoes are possible into tonight. Torcons at 2 and 3. Well, it's not the highest number on the scale. It's not the max threat. It's still a threat. If there is a number, there is a tornado threat. Here's the high-resolution future radar to give you a general idea of when you may be expecting these storms, possibly seeing these storms lining out across Minnesota and Iowa. Now it's the overnight hours tonight going into Illinois and southern Missouri. This is Weather Center Live, tracking a tropical storm Henri here on the Weather Channel, tracking a beautiful day in Martha's Vineyard. 83 degrees right now, feels like 88. Beautiful summer location, quintessential New England here. And unfortunately, it's not going to be a good weekend. In fact, here's a little foreshadowing. See that big vehicles going through the intersection right now. The bucket trucks here could lose some power in Martha's Vineyard this weekend because of Henri. And common sight when a storm is approaching. Now, it could be a coincidence or it could be directly related to the fact that Henri is on its way north, and in the path is Martha's Vineyard. Much of Massachusetts will see something out of this, whether it's the strong winds and the surge at the coast or an inland rain event, unfortunately. And same with Rhode Island and Connecticut. 70-mile-per-hour tropical storm right now. The lightning hints at the intensity of the storms, or it's an example of the intensity of the storms. You can see the circulations in there, also seeing kind of the breathing nature of this, those thin wispy clouds coming out of the top of the storm, allowing it to continue to grow and strengthen from below. And as we watch it, there's some ingredients that we're going to be looking at. Wind shear, it's going to weaken. So that means without something trying to tear the storm apart, it has more of an opportunity to grow and get stronger unfettered by the surrounding environment. And as the time wears on, while the wind shear may be going away or getting very low, the water temperatures will be coming down. So while in one sense it has a better chance for growing as it gets closer to land, a better chance for some weakening as it gets closer to land. So the question is, would you make it days without air conditioning or days without hot water? How about days without refrigerated food? And no one really wants to think about losing power for an extended period of time, but it happens. In fact, it happened to people in parts of New England this time last year after Isaias blew in and blew down trees across states in New England, including Connecticut and New Hampshire. But there are a few things that you can do using common household items that could make living through a power outage much easier. Here's meteorologist Mark Elliott to show us how it's done.
So here you are walking through your house, minding your own business when some weather comes through and out goes the power. Now, if you're like me, the first thing you do is try to find the flashlight to illuminate your way, but who wants to hold one of these all day long, pointing it every which direction to find what you're looking for? Here's a better way. You can hang the headlamp or the flashlight right onto a gallon of water, puts a nice soft glow in the room, and now you can see hands-free. Now, batteries are the nemesis in a power outage. Maybe your weather alert radio calls for AA's, but all you've got are AAA's. We can actually fix that too. Put a little bit of tinfoil in the gap for the battery size, and it still works. May not last as long, but it'll get you by in a pinch. Speaking of a pinch, you might finally want a hot meal. You're done with takeout? Use the pizza box as a solar oven with just some tinfoil and some saran wrap. You can have a hot meal right there on your own driveway. Hey, the power's back on. But is anything in here good to eat still? Well, we can do a little test for you. Put a mason jar with some water and food coloring horizontally in your freezer, then stack it vertically. If that defrosts, the shape of the ice changes, you'll know that nothing in there is safe to eat. And that's some ways that you can get through your next power outage.
Well, help is slowly coming to Haiti after a deadly earthquake. Badly constructed roads are hampering those recovery efforts. The quake is responsible for killing at least 2,100 people. And Grace didn't help matters, bringing tropical downpours shortly thereafter, causing mudslides. The storm has since struck Mexico as a hurricane in the Yucatan Peninsula and is gearing up for a second landfall later tonight. And this is the latest, with Grace actually up to 90 miles miles per hour. Still some strengthening to go with Grace prior to making landfall, making it a very strong Category 1 hurricane, potentially making landfall between Poza Rica and Veracruz sometime later this evening. Again, with some strengthening still to go, sitting over some incredibly warm waters right now, and that's going to allow for that strengthening to happen. The Air Force hurricane hunters are actually flying through this storm, and they were the ones that found those 90-mile-per-hour winds, those stronger winds that called for a little bit of the upgrade in Grace. So hurricane warnings from Veracruz and tropical storm warnings that extend up to the Tampico area. Again, landfall likely later tonight, but this brings it up to a 105-mile-per-hour storm, and that makes it very strong prior to making landfall. And as it continues to move inland, pushing a lot of water, potentially 5 to 8 inches of rain that could cause, yes, some flash flooding, but also some landslides and some mudslides as well.
If you have a tip.
A busy day going into the weekend here at the Weather Channel, tracking severe and tropical storms firing up across the country, including the south. This time-lapse video here shows the storms as they were rolling and rumbling into Birmingham, Alabama yesterday. Storms dropped about an inch of rain here. We'll show you the areas where there's a growing tornado threat going into tonight.
Meanwhile, New England is bracing for more tropical threats with Henri on the horizon. Fred's leftovers left quite a mess in Hartford, Connecticut. 3.46 inches of rain fell here just yesterday alone. Here's the latest path for Henri. Of course, now making that northerly turn. Yesterday it was moving to the west, today to the north. And as we push this into the future, you can see setting its sights on New England. A lot of New England, in fact, all of New England in that cone of uncertainty where we could see the center of Tropical Storm Henri potentially make landfall. That will happen in the later half of Sunday. So the time now, Chris, it's time now to prepare.
That's right. We want to take a look at one of the areas that needs to be ready here. If you need a walk on the beach, go ahead and take a walk on the beach today. But it's not going to be a great weekend overall here in New York on Fire Island. 82 degrees right now, and we're going to have some stormy, rough times here potentially across New York with the rough surf. Could see some surge coming up onto these beaches as well. We want to take you there from New York all the way up into Massachusetts. And here, looking at the Charles River, this is looking off to the east here in the distance. And this could be where the winds are coming from, being on the right or the east side of the area of low pressure as it's heading up into Massachusetts. Massachusetts will get hit one way or another, whether it's strong winds on the east side of the state or some very heavy rain in the central and west part of the state. That all remains to be seen. But I think somewhere in the state's going to get hit pretty hard, Molly.
I think that's a good point, Chris, because we still have time for this track to change. And over the past few days, we've seen a huge trend to the west. That's what's brought a lot of New England in the threat. But even areas like New York City all the way down to New Jersey have to pay very close attention to this forecast because, again, there is time for this to change. So the latest with Tropical Storm Henri up to 70 miles per hour. That makes it very close to hurricane status, and it has started to make that north-northwesterly turn. We anticipated this yesterday, and so now that process is happening, and we'll see this just skirt past the coasts of North Carolina, bringing some very rough surf, potentially intensifying as we head into Saturday. But once we get into Sunday, that's when areas of New England need to be watching this very closely because we're anticipating a landfall as a tropical storm Henri, in the second half of Sunday, potentially a very strong tropical storm. And zooming into this area, we're talking about Long Island, very much in play here, as well as Connecticut, Rhode Island, up into Cape Cod. Those are the same areas that we have a hurricane watch in effect. And this is for you to prepare. Today really is the day to prepare because as we go over the next 24 to 48 hours, we're going to watch those conditions go downhill as early as late Saturday night, early Sunday morning. We could see some of those winds and some of those rain bands start to move in. And Chris, it's no secret here at the Weather Channel that we are huge fans of the hurricane hunters, and it really was their flights yesterday that helped us zone in on this forecast and get a good idea of what is steering Henri.
That's a great point, Molly, I think, because a lot of times when you think about the hurricane hunters, you think of them going into an intense hurricane, which they definitely do, but they also do missions where they fly well away from the storm. with the goal of trying to figure out what the surrounding environment is doing and thus what it could do in the future to the system, to the tropical storm or hurricane. So with that, get an idea of the surrounding environment, which is the steering environment. What's going to push, tug, or pull the tropical system, which will mean ultimately where it ends up. So here's some of the forecast models through Sunday into Monday, and all of them, each one of these takes it to land. But look at the difference. There's possibilities in New Jersey. There's possibilities in New York, Long Island, even Connecticut, maybe clipping Montauk and going into Connecticut for a possible landfall, and also possibly into Rhode Island or into Massachusetts. That would be the center of the system. Now, based on historical errors, it can still go on the outside of these as well. When we show you the forecast cone here in just a little bit, keep that in mind. So high pressure over here is going to weaken a little bit, and as it does, it creates a little bit of a zone for Henri to start its trek to the north. And then here comes a trough, and sometimes these troughs will come and just kind of push it on, nudge it away from land. But look what it does. It has this turn back. So it may actually help draw the storm in a little bit closer to the United States, so more into land as opposed to, and with a high over here, not allowing it to get out, so more of a turn to land. And that's a big reason why, with the better forecast of what's going on with the surrounding environment, big reason why it looks more and more likely that we're not going to be able to escape a land hit. So it looks like there's going to be a landfall, not a land miss. So as far as the strength goes, wind shear, of course, can work to tear apart these storms. That's what we root for, is that wind shear to get in there and kind of rip up these storms. The winds going faster at different levels of the atmosphere or in different directions. Just a tough environment for these storms to really grow and blossom in. Unfortunately, that wind shear weakens, so that would favor development. Favoring development here over some warm waters. Big reason why, those two, why the forecast is for this to become a hurricane. It's only, get up to 74 miles an hour, we're talking a hurricane here, and it's at 70. So I would think that the next, we're going to see that get up to 75 here before you know. We hope it doesn't get stronger than that, because wherever it gets up to is going to be like the starting point for the weakening, because it's going to weaken. That's what it looks like is going to happen with the cooler waters. You lose that rocket fuel, essentially, the hot waters, and the cooler waters will help it weaken. But what's it coming down from, Molly? Is it coming down from a 75-mile-an-hour storm or an 80-mile-an-hour storm? What'll make a difference at landfall?
Certainly still is the question. A lot of questions still to be answered when it comes to Henri. Well, parts of New England still soaked by the remnants of Fred are bracing for another soggy blow from tropical storm Henri. More than 3 inches of rain fell yesterday in Worcester, Massachusetts. Henri is expected to dump a lot of rain on communities already waterlogged by Fred's downpours. So we do want to talk about the rainfall threat, because certainly that is significant. And it seems like New England just cannot catch a break this summer. It's been extremely soggy. In fact, July was some of the top 5 for a lot of the cities in New England as far as the wettest months that you've had on record, and as far as July goes. So as far as the rainfall, we're going to look at 2 different models here. We're going to start off with the European model, and that certainly brings the heavier rain over portions of Boston and even Providence getting in on that. But you'll flip this over to the American model and see a completely different picture, where the heavier rain is farther to the west, and it brings areas like Long Island into some very heavy rain, as well as Hartford up into Springfield, where we could see 5 to 8 inches of rain in a few spots with locally higher amounts possible. So the rainfall certainly is a big concern. A lot of the soil is extremely saturated. We have a lot of very tall, beautiful tree canopies in areas like Connecticut, Rhode Island, and the soil is so saturated that the roots are fairly weak now, and it won't take a whole lot of wind to cause those trees to fall. So something else to watch out for. This is the rain needed to flood in 3 hours. In a lot of these spots, it's 2 to 3 inches of rain in just a matter of 3 hours. We can easily see that out of a tropical system, especially one that's moving as slow as we expect Henri to be moving when it starts moving inland. So this is a closer view at Boston. Likely a few showers moving through on Saturday. That's not associated with Henri. That's with the trough that's moving through, but that could hamper your efforts to get prepared for Henri, as we see that heavier rain start to move in as early as Sunday morning. That's 7 a.m. local time, and just continue to drop buckets of rain over the Boston area. And this is after your very wet July. This is after the very wet Thursday that you had just yesterday with the remnants of Fred moving through. Let's zone into Hartford Hartford as well as Providence. Now, again, you could see a few of those showers on Saturday, but not very likely across Connecticut as well as Rhode Island. But here we go, Sunday morning. This is 4 a.m. Heavy rain moving over Long Island and then stretching into Connecticut as well as Providence, up into Hartford and even up into Springfield. And that rain will just continue. Once it starts to move in, it likely won't start to move out until we get to the better part of Monday. So that flash flooding is possible once we get to Sunday, but it's really Sunday into Monday morning that we're watching the areas Long Island, New Haven, Providence, up into Springfield, and even Boston and Cape Cod for the highest risk for flash flooding. Chris?
All right, Molly, people along the northeast coast, of course, you can imagine weary after the rain this week and some serious rainfall this week. And we're watching Henri's approach with some serious concern as well, because more rain and some storm surge could create a double flood threat here. That includes spots in cities from Atlantic City all the way up to Providence, Rhode Island, and into Massachusetts as well. And of course, New York and Connecticut in between. So 5 feet of storm surge possible throughout portions of New England, coastal areas. As we look at the likely arrival time of some of the tropical storm force winds, we're going to see by Saturday, possibly if it takes this more inland route or this closer to coast route, could be late Saturday for New Jersey when we start to see some of the strong winds. But Sunday is going to be going downhill. So you can think of it this way: get everything done tomorrow, because Sunday is not the day. You're going to see likely even the rain out ahead of some of these stronger winds, and we could see strong winds and very heavy rain all the way up into Vermont, New Hampshire, and into Maine. Here's another way to look at it, the wind speed. So you get into the blues and the purples. The purples essentially the tropical storm force winds, and then you have the strong winds, anything, purple to red. And we'll see through time as the system, the storm, expected to become a hurricane. You get into some of these colors in here, and now we're on this edge of things. Expected to get to 75 miles an hour with gusts likely stronger than that, of course. And that could be what we're dealing with, getting, possibly out of hurricane range, but back into a strong tropical storm as early as Sunday morning around sunrise for Long Island and for coastal areas, including Martha's Vineyard, Nantucket, Block Island there, Rhode Island, and into Connecticut. So this is going to be a really bad day on Sunday with some of the worst of the weather. And then by Monday, still some pretty blustery and gusty winds coming into New England, but surge is another concern. So with Henri expected to make landfall, either tropical storm or a hurricane, it could be a history maker here as the first hurricane to make a direct hit there since 1991. And that's why you can imagine a lot of people along the coast are getting ready, bringing in boats, tying down equipment, and playing it safe ahead of the storm. Monica Medea reports.
All morning.
Boaters betting on Mother Nature in Sandwich.
A lot of my friends are calling, should I pull the boat, should I pull the boat? And I'm just like, add extra lines, and if you have a trailer, pull the boat out.
Many not taking any chances on the potential Hurricane Henri, slated to make landfall Sunday. They're pulling their boats from the marina.
We got a place to put it. It's out of the water. This is a pretty safe marina anyway, but we can watch it at the same time.
Henri could be the first hurricane to directly hit New England since Hurricane Bob in 1991. The anniversary of that storm just yesterday.
Trees were down all over the place, and saw the sailboats almost right up on the road.
At least 17 people died then. The damage was immense. Today, the amount would be about $3 billion.
We're in the midst of go, 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 and then the storm comes along.
Lobsterman Jeffrey Richardson is also pulling his boat after selling some of his catch Friday. He says any day off the water is bad for his bottom line, but staying in is too risky.
Your business is protected being on land versus in the water where it can get destroyed. If it gets destroyed, I lose all my traps out there because I can't get to them.
Here in Sandwich, plenty of boats are staying put because this marina is known to be secure in a storm, and there's a list of people trying to borrow a boat slip.
The slip holders who have trailers, we're asking them if they can haul them so we can use the slips for people who don't have trailers.
Some are putting off preparing to enjoy a calm day on the water, while we all
hope for the best.
Well, as Henri approaches, people in New England have got to be thinking about the scenes they saw almost exactly 1 year ago. That's when Isaias tore a path through the Northeast and tore down thousands of trees in the process. First, the storm saturated the ground with pounding rain. Then it delivered the second blow, knocking down those weakened trees and wet roots with really strong winds. And of course, that is the fear, as we have seen a soggy summer so far in New England and parts of the Northeast. And then here comes some very strong winds that will likely bring down trees. Let's look at some of the recent impactful storms. Of course, we were just seeing video from Isaias almost exactly 1 year ago. And we have to mention Sandy, which of course was in October of 2012. But to note, Sandy came inland as a post-tropical system. When we talk about hurricanes in New England, it has been 30 years since we've seen a hurricane impact and make a direct landfall in New England. So it's been a long time. This is not forecast. Henri is not forecast to come on shore as a hurricane, but it certainly still is in within the realm of possibility. We are watching for a strong tropical storm. But Chris, I think at this point, it doesn't matter if it's a tropical storm. It doesn't matter if it's a hurricane. It's just going to be a couple of miles per hour in the wind difference. We're talking about the threats of a lot of rain, no matter what its status is.
And rain may end up being the big issue here. I want to get to some breaking weather right now. This in the Florida Panhandle, that red outlined area, may recognize that as a tornado warning, and that's exactly what it is in Okaloosa County here. Crestview in the path of this storm, a radar indicated tornado warning that is drifting down to the southeast right now. Again, we're here in the Florida Panhandle, and this is in the direction, it's heading in the direction, very close to, if not on top of, Cantontown right now. Milligan, Crestview, Killingsworth Crossroads, and then Deerland. Heads up, take cover. Tornado warning heading towards Interstate 10 in Okaloosa County.
You can't stop a force of nature. This hurricane season, rely on one of your own. Whoa. It's a fact. No other news network out there is trusted more than the Weather Channel.
This is epic.
Trusted to give you every advantage before the storm. Trusted to be there where and when you need us. Trusted to work around the clock until every threat is over.
We're in this for the long haul.
Because America doesn't trust hurricane season to just anyone. Named the world's most accurate forecaster, the Weather Channel.
Right now on the Weather Channel, tracking a tornado warning here in the Panhandle of Florida. A tornado warning with a lot of lightning associated with it, bearing down on Crestview here. The storm is moving to the southeast, and it is drifting off to the southeast in the direction of Interstate 10 here in Okaloosa County. And when we look at where the storm, the tornado likely is, somewhere in here, it is moving along and heading in the direction of Crestview. Should be there within about a half an hour or so, roughly around 2:56, and then Deerland, and if it holds together, Forest Highlands here. Meanwhile, back to one of our other top stories we're following right now on the Weather Channel, and that is the Northeast. Yesterday in Boston, this was the scene. Heavy rain, flooding conditions. That's right, this was yesterday. Could be again on Sunday because we are tracking Henri as residents. We're tracking their recycle bins and garbage bins going down the road. Here at the Weather Channel, we're watching once again another potentially big-time rainmaker for Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New York, and can't rule out New Jersey either in on some of the worst of the weather. So millions of people still within the area that could be seeing some of the worst weather from Henri. I'm meteorologist Chris Warren here in the lab, and want to get the very latest on this storm as of the 2 o'clock Eastern advisory from the National Hurricane Center. Still a 70-mile-an-hour tropical storm. Could get up to 75, and if that happens, that's the forecast, that would be a hurricane. So we could be talking about Hurricane Henri here before it makes landfall. A little piece of good news, something to hang on to, is that it is expected, based on some cooler waters, to weaken. Now, going from 75 to 70, not a huge difference in what ultimately is going to happen with the winds. So getting hit by a 75-mile-an-hour sustained wind is not a whole lot different than getting hit by a 70-mile-an-hour sustained winds. But what this doesn't show you also is how far over here, or over here, there will be some very heavy rain. So the winds, the surge, and then the fresh water, the rainfall, flooding, all concerns with this. And the probability of tropical storm winds are very high here in the red, 70 to 90%. And already that looks like the case for parts of Long Island into Connecticut and a lot of Massachusetts and pretty much all of Rhode Island, Molly.
Thanks, Chris. When you see a cloud this ominous, you know it's a sign of wicked weather to come. Check out this massive cloud that covered the skies of Elbert County, Colorado. That's just to the southeast of Denver, just to the northeast of areas of Colorado Springs, rather. This was during a round of severe storms that moved through, and things got pretty nasty in parts of the Centennial State, from 2-inch hail to more than 7 inches of rain in spots. As we look ahead to the rest of today and tonight, even more severe weather is possible as we track new rounds of storms potentially headed your way. And that means you in Sioux Falls, you have quite the thunderstorm pushing into the Sioux Falls area. A lot of lightning, a lot of thunder, a lot of very heavy rain, and potentially some gusty winds as well. That storm is not severe, but very dangerous as it pushes towards Sioux Falls, where we do have a severe thunderstorm warning. That's for Beltrami County, as well as Clearwater and Lake of the Woods. This is in Minnesota. There's Red Lake right there, just to give you a frame of reference. And this is a very strong line that's moving to the north and to the northeast with a lot of lightning. I mean, just look how electric this is. A lot of heavy rain and some 60-mile-per-hour winds and some hail embedded in that as well. You can see storms now starting to fire up, tapping into some of that energy that's in place. A lot of moisture in place, too. And we could see a few isolated tornadoes as well. And that includes areas from Topeka all the way up through Sioux Falls, even up into Fargo, where we have a 3 on our Torcon scale. So not an enormous threat, but certainly not zero. And this is the very same system that was moving through Colorado yesterday that did produce a few reported tornadoes. So something to look out for. Something else to look out for is the later that we get into the evening, the more that these storms will start to form a big line. And you can see that from Minneapolis all the way down to Kansas City and even down into the Wichita, Kansas area, where we could see some gusty winds and some stronger storms sustaining themselves through the overnight hours well into tomorrow morning. And that even brings areas like St. Louis and northern Illinois into play by 5 o'clock tomorrow morning local time, with the heavy rain, some flash flooding, and potentially some of those very gusty winds at play here too. So this is not the only area that we're going to be watching. We're going to watch this storm system continue to progress to the east as we go throughout the day tomorrow. So more to come with this, but for today, it's going to be the damaging winds, an isolated tornado or two, and potentially some hail as well. Chris?
All right, Molly, tracking Henri, of course, here on the Weather Channel. And heads up here, if you live in New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and even Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, it's on the way.
When you order...
If you're in Massachusetts right now, you have got to be concerned about this forecast because you still haven't had a chance to dry out from the absolute drenching you got from Fred. And now, here comes Henri. Car rides turned into water rides on Thursday when flash floods from Fred dropped as much as 3 inches of standing water on some streets. And Henri, well, it's expected to be another rainmaker for the area. Well, let's take a live look now at Montauk, New York this afternoon. You can see some dark skies on the distance. This is not related to Henri, but we do have some showers just offshore where a hurricane watch is in effect as we track the path of Henri. Particular concern to people here on Long Island is the potential storm surge, which could send water as high as 4 feet above normally dry ground in surge-prone areas this weekend. And speaking of Long Island, PSE&G Long Island, they sent out a tweet saying that if we do see this come in at a high intensity, go ahead and prep for the potential that we could see power outages lasting from 7 to 10 days. And they want you to go ahead and prep your homes and businesses. Always a good idea. And we have watches out from areas Cape Cod all the way through Newport, New London, New Haven, and Long Island. A significant portion of Long Island included in that hurricane watch. But if you're in New York City all the way down to New Jersey, I know you don't have any watches right now, but keep a very keen eye on this forecast because we have been seeing a slow trend to the west, and it certainly brings areas like New York City as well as New Jersey not quite out of the threat. So here is Tropical Storm Henri, 70 miles per hour, sustained winds moving to the northwest very slowly right now and tapping into some incredibly warm water. There have been several hurricane hunter missions into this storm. We saw a couple yesterday that helped provide us with a much better forecast for today, but right now we have a NOAA aircraft in there. It's an upper level mission where they're gaining some of information just about what's going on in the upper levels just above Henri. So they're not going to quite fly through the direct center of this like we see a lot of the missions do, but they are gaining some valuable information that once again will be fed into the weather models and provide a much better forecast. We're so grateful for what the hurricane hunters do. They work a lot of hours during hurricane season. So we do have quite a few thunderstorms ongoing, some very strong thunderstorms as it's sitting over some warm water and still some warm water that it will travel into. But what we do see, and this could work in our favor, is that moving into some slightly, and I mean relatively, cooler water on its approach to New England. And Chris, that could be good news for the intensity and help bring it down just a little bit prior to landfall.
And people across New England today hopefully watching the forecast because what Molly was just showing us could have more than just some wind. Expecting to see some rain and some surge for some coastal areas. Flash flooding is a major concern for some of the metro areas. We saw flooding yesterday in Boston, with Connecticut being right in the path of Henri. And again, it is expected to strengthen into a hurricane before it hits the Northeast. However, weakening is also expected. Should get up to hurricane strength and then weaken back down, either coming on shores as maybe a 70-mile-an-hour tropical storm, and a 75-mile-an-hour storm would be a hurricane. Not a huge difference, but could have some similar impacts with both of them. So some dangerous and possible destructive flash flooding also a concern. Here's one forecast model. The GFS gives you an idea of how this may play out with some very heavy rain, possibly 5 inches or more will come with this, and going all the way up into Massachusetts, possibly even southern Vermont. Again, all the forecasts are likely to shift and change a little bit. So who ends up with the most rain and the strongest winds, we just don't know yet. That is not something we can know, but we have the range of where it's going to happen. And that range goes for rain from the Delmarva to Maine over the next couple of days, and for the wind, really New Jersey to Massachusetts and areas in between. A lot still, Molly, that needs to be figured out with this, but we have a pretty good idea generally where it's going and how strong it's going to be when it gets there.
And that's certainly, as we're zoning into that area, you have to make preps. Go ahead and make them today. You still have tomorrow as well, but as we get into the later half of tomorrow, particularly after dark, you'll start to notice conditions go downhill just a little bit. So now and tomorrow, those are your days to prepare. A storm surge watch in effect for a significant portion of Long Island, the Long Island Sound, up into Martha's Vineyard, Nantucket, and the Cape Cod area. This is where we could see the most significant surge happen, and that's 3 to 5 feet of that seawater being pushed onto normally dry ground just by the winds of Henri as it approaches landfall. 2 to 4 feet across the Long Island area. And then look at this, even New Jersey from Cape May all the way up into New York included in this with 1 to 3 feet. And New Jersey, keep a really close eye on this forecast. But again, we are seeing some trends to the west that could bring you into that higher threat level. And those tropical storm force winds arriving as early as Sunday morning, making it very hard to prep as Henri approaches.
He looked.
This is the Weather Channel, and this was rain from yesterday in Hartford, Connecticut. Heavy rain coming from some of the remnants of Fred. Now Henri on the way to the northeast. After scenes like this unfolded yesterday, it could happen again this weekend. It could see possibly several inches of rain again in Connecticut, possibly in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New York, and New Jersey. All possible to see even more rain and, unfortunately, possibly more of that. This is the rain that came down over the past couple of days, and you can see a big swath right here and across central and northern Connecticut into parts of Massachusetts, and that is now some very wet ground that's not going to accept a lot more water, so the chance that the water's going to start running off is going to happen sooner. It's going to happen, but it's going to happen sooner with water already in the soil. So Sunday, Monday, the possibility for flash flooding goes all the way up to Portland, Maine. It includes parts of southern Vermont and southern New Hampshire. And then as we look at the path of the system, again, the forecast is for the center to go like this, but based on history, it's still possible the center could go anywhere through here, and even about a third of the time, based on historical errors, the center goes outside of this. But outside of this, on the far east side, is still really close to land. So escaping impacts on land does not look like it's a possibility. So get ready. Essentially, Molly, for everything here in the Northeast, unfortunately.
Yeah, and today and tomorrow are really the days to prepare. A Georgia daycare is closed today after flooding forced fire crews to save 27 children and 4 staff members. This happened in Austell in the Atlanta area yesterday. You can see firefighters wading through knee-deep water in the parking lot outside. The storms dropped nearly 3 inches of rain in a matter of hours for the hardest hit neighborhoods in metro Atlanta. And as we move to the Carolinas, still trying to dry out from Fred. 2 people are dead after high waters swept through Haywood County, North Carolina. That's just west of Asheville. Haywood County Emergency Services now saying 7 people remain missing at this time. Meanwhile, Henri is sending dangerous swells toward the Carolina coast, both South Carolina and North Carolina, even though you're not going to see any big direct impacts from Henri. You can see it's actually swirling down here, but it's pushing some very strong onshore flow into areas like the Carolinas, including North and South Carolina. That's going to make the water pretty dangerous today. So if you have a vacation plan, maybe you're trying to fit some beach time in, it's your last summer vacation before school starts, just check with the lifeguard before you get in the water. That's why they're there. They're there to help you out and to keep you from the most dangerous areas. So there's Henri continuing to swirl to the north and to the northwest, but otherwise we're not going to see any impacts in the southeast from Henri other than that dangerous surf. What we will continue to see in the southeast is more summer downpours. We saw a lot yesterday, and it caused some substantial flooding in some areas, but this will continue not only today, but very early on Saturday morning for areas in western Tennessee. That includes Nashville, all the way down into northern Alabama, potentially seeing some strong Saturday morning storms before stretching into areas like Atlanta, all the way down to Montgomery. This will continue throughout the weekend. I mean, these are your typical summer downpours. We certainly have enough humidity and moisture in the air to cause some very heavy rain. And we could see another additional 1 to 2 inches of rain widespread with locally higher amounts possible. It's always the case in the summertime in the south. So let's zone into Nashville here and see what it's looking like as we go throughout the weekend. You will see some spotty thunderstorms today continuing. I think it's going to be Saturday morning that we see that big line of storms move through, but still some hit or miss storms possible once that moves through and we continue into Saturday afternoon. Chris?
All right, Molly, now we want to go to Chicago and enjoy some pretty nice boating weather right now. That's the place to be. 87 degrees right now. Get your toes in Lake Michigan. Feels like 90. Some stormy times on the way here for Chicago with plenty of sunshine right now, but it's this warm and humid air that helps really serve as the rocket fuel for the storms that are on the way. We begin to look at the storms for this weekend with what's happening right now on the front end of the weekend here. You can see storms developing in an atmosphere that is ready for that air to rise and at times be explosive. A lot of energy for these storms to rock with here. And in southeast South Dakota, some thunderstorms going through here. Also a severe thunderstorm warning in the northern portion of Minnesota right now, and this is the area into tonight where some of the storms have the possibility of rotating, and the potential for these rotating storms to produce tornadoes is more likely. So these strong storms are expected, and it's possible there's a 3 and a 2 on our Torcon, so you're on the scale. There's the possibility for tornadoes going into tonight. Here's the high-resolution future radar. Gives you an idea of how the day's going to play out, with thunderstorms here going from Kansas up into Omaha and Council Bluffs by this evening, and then through central Minnesota tonight and into the Twin Cities, likely just after dark. Could see a damaging wind threat going into the overnight hours, now at midnight tonight for central Illinois, then cruising into the overnight hours for the Quad Cities and into western Illinois and central and southern Missouri in the morning. Looks pretty messy. Here's how the rest of the day is going to go, with midday storms from Green Bay to Milwaukee down to Chicago, and still getting a little bit of a break before Sunday here in the upper Midwest. Right now here on Weather Center Live, a look at Martha's Vineyard. Vineyard Haven, Massachusetts, 83 degrees right now. It feels like 88. This is quintessential summertime in America location. Unfortunately, it is an island out in the Atlantic, south of the mainland portion of Massachusetts, and well in the zone where these flags in the distance, they're going to be whipping around pretty hard come Sunday. And come Sunday, the weather's not going to be all right. I can tell you that here in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and New York, with the potential for some very heavy rain and strong winds. And this right here, look how far south it is. You head this way, and you're right over here, the Florida-Georgia line here. And it has a way to travel. And on its way up to the north, it is expected to get stronger. Henri right now, a 70-mile-per-hour tropical storm expected to get up to 75 miles an hour, which would make it a hurricane. However, before landfall, it's expected to weaken again. So there's a lot of moving parts, if you will, with this, and a lot of moving air wrapping around the center of this circulation, with a lot of thunderstorms right there in the middle. A couple of the factors we're looking at. One, of course, the wind shear. If you don't want storms, most of us don't, you're rooting for wind shear to get into the storm and kind of rip it apart, tear it apart. It's winds going at different speeds and or different directions at different levels of the atmosphere. Unfortunately, that weakened, so it goes away. More conducive now for development, for it to get stronger. And also, about that time, water temperatures are quite warm. You need about 80 degrees. We're talking mid-80s. And that helps fuel these storms. Now, notice at the time it becomes a hurricane, expected to, shortly after it starts going over slightly cooler water. So it loses that jet fuel, essentially. So some weakening, gradual weakening, is expected as it heads to the north. Can't rule out flooding, can't rule out power outages with this. And we know that when the power is out after a tropical storm or a hurricane, many businesses and homeowners rely on backup generators. While generators, of course, are very useful, they also include some hidden dangers. Here's home improvement expert Danny Lipford with what you need to know before you fire yours up.
I'm Danny Lipford from Today's Homeowner. A portable generator can be a lifesaver when the power goes out after a storm, but only if it's working properly. Check your oil, fill it with fresh gas, and test run it to make sure that it's ready when you need it. When you use a portable generator, it's important to protect your family from carbon monoxide in the engine's exhaust. Carbon monoxide is invisible, odorless, and very deadly, so never run a generator inside or in a partially enclosed space space, only operate them outdoors with plenty of ventilation away from windows, doors, or crawl spaces. When it's time to refuel your generator, make sure you shut it off and let it cool down a bit before refilling the tank. Spilled fuel on a hot engine can cause a fire or explosion. Never connect a portable generator directly to your home's wiring because the voltage can backfeed onto power lines, possibly injuring utility workers or your neighbors. Instead, use heavy-duty extension cords to connect individual lights or appliances to the generator and be sure they're unplugged when you start or stop it. Also, be sure any extension cord connections are protected from rain or any standing water. Remember, the first priority in a storm situation is keeping yourself and your family nice and safe.
Help is slowly coming into Haiti after a deadly earthquake. Badly constructed roads are hampering the efforts. The quake is responsible for killing at least 2,100 people, and grace didn't help matters, bringing tropical downpours shortly thereafter, causing mudslides. The storm has since struck Mexico as a hurricane in the Yucatan Peninsula and is gearing up for a second landfall later tonight. So here is the latest on Hurricane Grace. Right now, the winds up to 90 miles per hour. And those winds, those stronger winds, were actually found by the Air Force hurricane hunters that were in the storm earlier. It's a pretty strong Category 1 hurricane right now, but there is still time for some strengthening. And that's why there is a hurricane warning posted from Veracruz up to even all the way up to the Tampico area under a hurricane watch, and tropical storm watch is out for those as well. Potentially making landfall 105 miles per hour near the Poza Rica area before stretching inland, bringing a lot of rain inland as well. So we're talking about not only a storm surge threat here, also a rainfall threat, as you would typically expect with landfalling tropical systems. A lot of rainfall, up to 5 to 8 inches widespread, but some locally higher amounts possible from Tampico all the way down to Veracruz. That's where we could see the highest rainfall amounts, and within that, we could see some landslides as well. This is not the only area that we're watching. Of course, we have Tropical Storm Henri, and then we have this other area that's in the Atlantic. It's a wave coming off the coast of Africa. Right now, it only has a 20% chance of development, but something we'll certainly be watching very closely.
How do we stuff Reese's peanut butter, pretzels?
The simple point here is we really would like everybody to be off the roads at the height of the storm, which will probably last all day Sunday and through until the early part of Monday. We don't want people to be stuck in the traffic on the Cape Cod bridges when the storm is in full force on Sunday.
That was Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker talking a short time ago about getting ready for Henri. The storm is expecting to move into New England this weekend and bring some big tropical impacts. Here's the latest path for Henri, making that northerly turn and taking it right into New England. But areas like New York City and New Jersey, pay close attention over the next 24 hours because we're starting to see some trends to the west that could bring bigger impacts your way.
And here's a live look at Fire Island, New York. It's 83 degrees right now, and the wind whipping the flag just a little bit, just kind of tossing it around. Boy, things are going to be a lot different by Sunday. The waves that'll be crashing on shore are likely to be a lot rougher, and this scene is going to look a lot different. And Boston right now getting a break. The Charles River looking pretty quiet. Streets looked like rivers yesterday as we watched some of the heavy rain from Fred come through here in Boston. Now, Henri is bringing another threat for more flash flooding. And Molly has a closer look at what Henri is doing right now.
Well, thanks, Chris. We have winds up to 70 miles per hour now, so just shy of some hurricane status here. But at this point, it doesn't matter really if it becomes a hurricane or if it stays a very strong tropical storm. The impacts really remain the same. And you can see this is starting to make its north turn. We did expect this because there is a big area of high pressure that's sitting about right there. Yesterday, it was eroding and kind of shearing the northern side of Henri, but now it's starting to weaken. Not only is that allowing for some strengthening, but it's also allowing for that turn to the north. We do expect this to gain a little bit more strength as it moves over some very warm waters of the Gulf Stream, up to 80 miles per hour by Saturday morning. Here's the catch, though, and what could be a good thing for a lot of people is that there's some relatively cooler water sitting right here just to the south of New England, and that could bring down the intensity just a little bit prior to making landfall. Here's our cone of uncertainty, and again, this tracks where potentially the center of Henri could end up. So that means areas, pretty much all of New England is in that cone. But as I mentioned earlier, we could see areas like New York City and New Jersey into some of the bigger impacts as we start to see a little bit more of a trend to the west. So we are looking at hurricane watches and tropical storm watches already being posted. These are out there, so you have time to prepare. Looking at some of the areas that right now we're highlighting could see the biggest impacts. It does include Long Island and Long Island Sound, New Haven, New London, Newport, as well as over into Cape Cod. A lot of these areas not even in school yet, so you're trying to fit in those last-minute summer plans, maybe some last-minute summer trips that you're taking. It's just not going to be the weekend to do that. In fact, you need to take your preparations today as well as tomorrow, just as things will start to go downhill as we get throughout the day on Sunday. Also, a storm surge watch in effect from Long Island all the way up to Cape Cod. We want to bring in Chris Warren here because there are some very interesting atmospheric aspects that are steering Henri in this direction.
That's right, and it's really what the overall environment around Henri has to say as to where it ultimately ends up. So let's get into that right now a little bit here on the Weather Channel. As we watch the couple of the forecast models, well, let me rephrase that, several of the forecast models, in the near term, all pretty much on track, right? They're all going in pretty much the same direction, just about a due north situation here. But look at the spread. It goes from New Jersey to Massachusetts. So that's roughly about where the cone of uncertainty is as well. So some of the players in the atmosphere that are going to help steer this, move it along as it continues to, and it's expected to strengthen in the next day or so. It's this area of high pressure and this big dip here in the jet stream. Both of those having a huge say on where this ends up. So as this high pressure weakens a little bit, it is going to allow some room for this to head up, for Henri to head a little bit farther to the north. Now, unfortunately, there's also going to be some high pressure here that's now going to sort of give it a little bit of a block, not allowing it to have that escape route out into the Atlantic. On top of that, it appears that this right here, the dip in the jet stream right here, and this upper level disturbance will sort of help and kind of grab Henri and help draw it in up into the coastal areas here. And that's the track. That's why we're thinking it's looking like a landfall. It's very much less of a likelihood that this misses land, that it goes east of Cape Cod. Can't rule it out completely, but it doesn't look like the most likely scenario at this point. So what about intensity? How strong is it going to be when it gets there? So wind shear would tear apart a storm. There's not a lot of it. That also weakens. So as it's heading to the north, it has more elbow room, essentially, a little bit more room to build and to grow. It also has the warm waters to work with. And it's these warm waters in the mid-80s. You only need about 80 degrees. But you get into the mid-80s, we're talking some super warm waters, and with depth, too. Because the storm's going to be, kicking up the water, it can stir things up. And if it's just stirring up more warm water, that sustains the storm that much more. But if it stirs up cool water, that helps, weaken it as well. So that being said, expected to get up to a hurricane. However, with cooler waters, it is expected to gradually weaken. Unfortunately, Molly, it's the gradual term we don't like here. So not significant weakening before making landfall.
And the fact that it could slow down just a little bit also going to cause some problems in the rainfall department. Parts of New England still soaked from the remnants of Fred are bracing for another soggy blow from tropical storm Henri. More than 3 inches of rain fell yesterday in Worcester, Massachusetts. Henri is expected to dump a lot of rain on communities already waterlogged by Fred's downpours. And we do want to talk about the rainfall forecast, because if you've been sticking with us here on the Weather Weather Channel. You'll notice that we've seen some changes in some of our models. This is typical as we're watching a tropical system approach, but this has been a big shift to the west. So this is the European model. This brings this in over Long Island. It brings some of the heavy rainfall into western Connecticut and some extremely heavy rainfall into areas of New York. So we're looking at this potentially slowing down and parking itself over New York and it dropping a lot of rain in the meantime. This is the American model, a slightly different picture here, but the trend is your friend if you're in areas like Boston and Cape Cod, because this brings a lot of the heavy rain just to your west. The trend is not your friend in areas like New York, up into Hartford, even Springfield, and of course in upstate New York, where we could see torrential rainfall. So this is a look at the American model. And again, don't get married exactly to where this makes landfall, because we will likely see some changes. But this brings it in to areas like Long Island, across Connecticut, even up into Vermont and New Hampshire before washing it out as our trough picks it up and pushes it off to the north. I do want to take us to the European model, because this is the difference that we've seen. This is the latest run of the European model, and it takes it over Long Island as well as Connecticut. But watch what happens over New York. This kind of just puts on the brakes big time, and it sits and spins over New York as well as portions of Connecticut, even into Vermont, where the potential to drop a lot of rain in a short amount of time is very high. And certainly that would lend to a very high flash flooding risk for many of these areas. So this is the rainfall needed to flood in 3 hours. I think this graphic's really interesting because it really does tell the story of how high the risk is for flash flooding. So we're talking about areas that only need 2 to 4 inches of rain to flood, and we can pick that up easily in a tropical system, especially where you see those stronger bands start to wind their way onshore and move inland. And in the situation or the scenario that we would see it park itself over New York, we would see a lot more rain than that. So flash flooding tomorrow through Sunday morning from New Jersey all the way up into New York. But this is the threat that we're watching as we head Sunday into Monday morning, with a higher chance for flash flooding Long Island all the way up into Springfield. Chris?
And Molly, of course, people along the northeast coastline and well inland, in fact, should be paying attention to what we're going to be seeing here. You've already had days of wet weather, and now Henri is approaching, and that is likely and should be for a lot of people a major concern. The storm is expected to bring some dangerous storm surge to some places. That could be Atlantic City, expecting some rough surf at the very least there, but all the way over to some inland locations, going up some rivers, and there's Providence, Rhode Island on the right, whether it's water coming from the ocean or from land. Got to watch out for the water, for the surge, or from the flash flooding that could come with Henri. So right now, a look at the likely arrival times, when you can expect to see some of these stronger winds, the tropical storm force winds. And Saturday night, it's getting closer. Possibly overnight, some strong winds getting into southern New Jersey. Again, this is going to have a lot to do with the track of the storm. At this point, it could be a hurricane as well. So keep that in mind. The tropical storm force winds expected to be from New Jersey to Massachusetts and Cape Cod. Again, depending on the track, if it's to one side or the other, one side or the other may not have very strong winds, and one side could have a lot stronger winds. But I would expect if you're in this area here at some point, just be ready, be prepared for tropical storm force winds. The wind speed forecast now, you'll see that the strongest winds will be closest to the center, but it's not necessarily, when you get away from it, going to be any walk in the park here. And 8 o'clock tomorrow night, here it is knocking on the door. And even before sunrise, we could see the weather going downhill big time on the eastern portion of Long Island. So Montauk and the Hamptons, things could be pretty nasty. Again, this is still quite a ways away in time from where we are right now. So, a movement over here, a movement over here could mean a big difference for some people, for better or worse. And by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, it could still be battering. Now, Montauk could end up getting the strong winds and some heavy rain again, but from a different direction as the low moves up. You have winds coming up out of the south as it approaches on one side, and then perhaps out of the north on the other. Depending on the track, you could get the wind directions and strong winds changing as well. So Henri, of course, we know could make history in New England this weekend if it makes landfall as a hurricane. It would be the first first to make a direct hit since 1991. That's why right now a lot of people along the coast are getting ready and are bringing in their boats, tying down equipment, and playing it safe ahead of the storm. Monica Medea reports.
The phone's been ringing all morning.
Boaters betting on Mother Nature in Sandwich.
A lot of my friends are calling, should I pull the boat, should I pull the boat? And I'm just like, add extra lines, and if you have a trailer, pull the boat out.
Many not taking any chances on the potential Hurricane Henri, slated to make landfall Sunday. They're pulling their boats from the marina.
We got a place to put it. It's out of the water. This is a pretty safe marina anyway, but we can watch it at the same time.
Henri could be the first hurricane to directly hit New England since Hurricane Bob in 1991. The anniversary of that storm just yesterday.
Trees were down all over the place, and saw the sailboats almost right up on the road.
At least 17 people died then. The damage was immense. Today, the amount would be about $3 billion.
We're in the midst of go, 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 and then the storm comes along.
Lobsterman Jeffrey Richardson is also pulling his boat after selling some of his catch Friday. He says any day off the water is bad for his bottom line, but staying in is too risky.
Your business is protected being on land versus in the water where it can get destroyed. If it gets destroyed, I lose all my traps out there because I can't get to them.
Here in Sandwich, plenty of boats are staying put because this marina is known to be secure in a storm, and there's a list of people trying to borrow a boat slip.
The slip holders who have trailers, we're asking them if they can haul them so we can use the slips for people who don't have trailers.
Some are putting off preparing to enjoy a calm day on the water, while we all
hope for the best.
People in New England have got to be thinking about the scenes they saw almost exactly 1 year ago. That's when Isaias tore a path through the Northeast and tore down thousands of trees in the process. First, the storm saturated the ground with pounding rain, and then it delivered the second blow, knocking down those weakened trees and wet roots with some really strong winds. And of course, that's the fear in New England. There's a lot of beautiful tall tree canopies in Connecticut as well as Rhode Island. A lot of New England covered in some beautiful trees. It makes it so beautiful in the fall, but it also poses a big threat when you've seen as much water as New England has recently, and then you combine that with more water from a tropical system and the wind coming in with Henri as well. Let's talk about some of the recent impactful storms that we've seen in New England. Of course, we just saw video from Isaias. That was almost exactly a year ago. And then, of course, we have to mention Sandy back in 2012. That made landfall as a post-tropical system. But let's shift our focus to hurricanes that have made direct landfalls in New England. And you just heard Chris mention this earlier. It would be the first one since 1991. So 30 years ago, Hurricane Bob, the anniversary of that was yesterday. Of course, not forecast right now to make landfall as a hurricane, but something, Chris, that we're certainly watching very closely.
And of course, right now watching what this ultimately may end up doing. Again, we're looking here by Monday. It's going to be pretty much out of here, but want to get you started with when to expect some of the worst of the weather. Again, tropical storm conditions expected for most areas when it does happen by Sunday night, or Sunday morning, I should say. Saturday night into Sunday, we're going to see things really go downhill in these areas. And again, the exact track of this storm does remain to be seen as we go through, but it looks like somewhere from here to here, the center of the storm is expected to go and produce some strong winds and some heavy rain. Don't forget to download the Weather Channel app on your TV.
Nothing rhymes with Liberty Mutual.
Only pay for what you need.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
We were still at work. We started getting these notifications from Ring. 2 guys trying to break in. I hit the site.
Evacuate immediately.
Oh no. Go, go! I'm on!
Named the world's most accurate forecaster, the Weather Channel.
Significant storm. It has a path that's between 60 and 80 miles. It could stretch anywhere between New Haven and Cape Cod. And I will tell you that Eversource is well prepared. We have just changed our characterization of this storm from a level 4 to a level 3, which means that up to 49% of our customers could be without power for up to 10 days. So customers should be prepared.
Let's hope that doesn't happen, but customers definitely should be prepared. Also, prepare as much as you can for this. This is possible. This was yesterday in Boston, and heavy rain is again going to be one of the big threats with this. Of course, winds will be there, surge will be there, but rain is a big one here. Again, this was yesterday. Some of the streets in Boston with the recycle bins, the trash bins, just going for a float, unfortunately, here. So the next rainmaker is going to be Henri. It's going to bring rain and it's going to bring wind. We know for a fact there's going to be a lot of heavy rain. That means the threat for flooding is going to be there. The winds are going to be there too, just a matter of how strong and for who. Those are two of the big question marks that we're going to continue to try to answer for you here on the Weather Channel through tomorrow and before it makes landfall. And that's right, it does look like this will be a landfalling system. Whether it's a tropical storm or a hurricane still remains to be seen. The forecast is tropical storm right now, but again, things often can and do change. And that's built into the forecast, frankly. As you see, the forecast is right here. This is the forecast from the National Hurricane Center. But what this product is, what this cone is, this graphic, this is based on forecast errors from the past. So when you look at history of the center line of the forecast, it's been wrong by about this much, 2/3 of the time. And about 1/3 of the time, the center actually goes outside of the cone. Even if it goes outside of the cone, on the east side, look what happens. It's still going to impact land one way or another. And can't rule out New York and New Jersey. Let me rephrase that, like New York City and New Jersey. It will be hitting New York. Long Island looks like one of the better bets, especially out on Montauk, with at this point a 90% chance that you're going to have tropical storm force winds, even if it shifts quite a bit. If we're to shift quite a bit, central and eastern Long Island still in the red. So a high chance tropical storm winds may be stronger are on the way, Molly.
Thanks, Chris. Well, when you see a cloud this ominous, you know it's a sign of wicked weather to come. Check out this massive cloud that covered the skies of Elbert County, Colorado, between Denver and Colorado Springs. On Thursday, during a round of severe storms, things got pretty nasty in parts of the Centennial State, from 2-inch hail to more than 7 inches of rain in spots. As we look ahead to the rest of today and tonight, even more severe weather is possible as we track new rounds of storms potentially headed your way. And if you're in Sioux Falls, you just got done with a round of thunderstorms. Those are moving out. Those are moving into Minnesota across the I-90 corridor and pushing towards the Marshall area. So you've got about an hour before those arrive, Marshall. We do have a tornado warning. This is for North Dakota, Cass County, Buffalo, Gill, and Tower City until 3:30 local time. This is radar indicated, but look how isolated this is. Initially, when these storms stay isolated, that tornado threat goes just up a little bit in this environment because it's tapping into all the energy around it. It doesn't have to share with a line of thunderstorms, but we do have a line. Minnesota all the way down through portions of Iowa. This just continues to tap into all the energy and moisture that we have in place. And just like what we saw, an isolated tornado, we could have more tornadoes spin up. A torcon of 3 today out of 10 from Topeka all the way up to the Fargo area. As we continue through the rest of the evening hours, we'll see a line of storms form from Minneapolis all the way back into Kansas, potentially all the way back into southern Kansas. These will progress to the east, and they'll sustain themselves through the overnight hours as those lower level winds continue to pick up overnight, and that'll produce some damaging winds, potentially Des Moines all the way through Kansas City, and even bringing storms very early into the morning time frame for western Illinois, stretching down into the St. Louis area. So it could be a little bit bit of a noisy morning for you in St. Louis. This is going to continue for the next few hours, so just watch out for the threats of, again, some heavy rainfall, which would be welcome in a few of these areas, as well as some visibility decreased on the roadways, lightning, hail, and the chance for an isolated tornado. Chris?
All right, Molly, time now for our great weekend destination. And what better place to be than in San Diego? Nice little breeze. It's just about perfect any time of the year, quite frankly, here in the extreme southern portion of Los Angeles. And we're going to be seeing, I think, some decent weather for the most part in San Diego. While we're tracking some pretty nasty weather elsewhere, you may be dreaming of being here. It's going to be hot, though, I think, here, especially this close to the water, 86, 87 degrees this weekend, partly to mostly sunny skies.
Hi, I'm Jimmy JJ.
If you are in Massachusetts right now, you have got to be concerned about this forecast because you still haven't had a chance to dry out from the absolute drenching you got from Fred. And now here comes Henri. Car rides turned into water rides on Thursday when flash floods from Fred dropped as much as 3 inches of standing water on some streets. And Henri is expected to be another rainmaker. Let's take a live look now at Montauk, New York this afternoon, where a hurricane watch is in effect as we track the path of Henri. Of particular concern to the people here in Long Island is the potential for storm surge, which could send water as high as 4 feet above ground in surge-prone areas this weekend. Just imagine waiting all summer long to take that trip out to Long Island, vacation right before school starts, and then here comes Henri. Unfortunately, that's what a lot of people in New England and areas in Long Island are dealing with as we approach the weekend. Hurricane watches out for Long Island all the way up to the Cape Cod area, and a tropical storm watch out a little bit farther to the west. But even areas like New York City all the way down into New Jersey, pay really close attention as the forecast evolves over the next 24 hours, because we are starting to see some trends moving this to the west. Right now, sustained winds 70 miles per hour, and it's taking that north turn that we have been expecting. And right now there is a Hurricane Hunter flight in this NOAA 49, and that's doing an upper air observation. It's going around Henri, getting an idea of what the environment is in some of the higher levels of the atmosphere, and that gives us a better idea not only what's going on around Henri, but that's going to be fed into the weather models that will improve the forecast in the long run. There's a lot of thunderstorms going on, but it seems like the low-level circulation isn't quite aligned with those thunderstorms right now. That should keep it in check, at least in the short term, but this is going to move over some extremely warm water. As it does, we do expect some strengthening as it approaches New England. That's when it moves across some relatively cooler water. And Chris, we're hoping that that keeps the intensity in check.
I said we're also hoping that people are watching the forecast today in the Northeast. What looks nice in Connecticut and decent in Boston is going to be changing in a big way in less than 48 hours here, and a lot less than 48 hours, frankly. We're going to be having, we have one more day here tomorrow to get ready for what is on the way. And hopefully by the end of the day tomorrow, we're going to have a much, much better idea if it's going to be closer to Boston or if it's going to be closer to Connecticut or even the western side of New York, Long Island, I mean, the boroughs, including New York City. So still a lot we got to figure out, but what we do know, winds are coming and heavy rain and possibly some flooding also on the way. The European model just went wow with the rain compared to the last time we looked at this. Before it was showing a swath right here. Now it's showing an insane amount of rainfall, also including what's going to come ahead of Henri, but nonetheless, you get the sense that there's going to be a lot of rain. And this is also a reminder, dramatically as it looks compared to just a couple hours ago, there's still a lot that can change. And to put that in perspective, the European that I just showed you, that model and the amount of rainfall showed a swath less than what the GFS is showing. But regardless, even if the GFS, which isn't showing as much rain as the European, even if this is correct, this is a lot of rain. And this swath right here is 5 to 8 inches. That's the orange in there. Now, however, with the movement of the low, if it heads more this way or if it goes this way, this will also be going with it. So you just use this as kind of a guide as to what this storm, whether it's a tropical storm or a hurricane when it comes onshore, what it has the potential to bring with it. And it does look like flash flooding, Molly, is going to be one of the huge concerns, along with the other threats.
Yeah, there's always multi-threats when we have tropical systems. So we want to dive into what's going to be happening with the wind and the waves and the surge. There is a storm surge watch. Long Island, the Long Island Sound. It includes coastal areas of Connecticut, Rhode Island, as well as Cape Cod, the Nantucket Sound as well. That's where we could see some serious storm surge move into areas 3 to 5 feet over towards the Cape Cod area, 2 to 4 feet for Long Island and the Long Island Sound. And then this even brings in areas of coastal New Jersey all the way down to Cape May, where 1 to 3 feet of storm surge possible. It all depends on the timing, and you'll hear that over and over again of exactly when this makes landfall, if it does coincide with a low tide or a high tide, and certainly a high tide would make that water situation worse. So we're saying that today and tomorrow are really the days to prepare, because we'll start to see those tropical storm force winds moving in as early as Sunday morning, potentially some areas even seeing some outer rain bands and some stronger winds late Saturday night. So Sunday, you're just really not going to be able to prepare. The time really is today into tomorrow. We will see those winds continue to pick up as we see some strengthening in the short term, but again, that weakening possible as it approaches New England.
It takes. Right now on the Weather Channel, we are currently watching people get ready, as they should, getting ready for what could be a hurricane, more likely at this point a tropical storm. But regardless, from Massachusetts to New Jersey, anywhere in there could see some really bad, better have your boat out of the water kind of weather. We're seeing this storm zipping on up from the south. The storm that's going to be impacting up here by Sunday is just east of North Florida right now. So it's got to trek up the East Coast, and it's going to do pretty quickly. So tomorrow's the big day. If you have interest, if you live here, if you're visiting here, by here I mean here, anywhere in here. If you're living, visiting, or have interest here, tomorrow's a big day when our forecasts, I think, are going to have a much better idea of exactly where this is going to be going and exactly who ends up with the heaviest rain. What we're showing you right now is the heavy rain from the past couple of days. And that's an important factor when determining who's going to end up getting floodwaters. So you think of a sponge that it has a lot of water already in it. What happens when you add more water to it? It's just going to fill up fast and run off. It's kind of like what the soil's going to do. A lot of water in it already. It's going to fill up fast and run off. It's not going to store the water in the little pores in the soil. That's already that's no vacancy essentially. So more water going in, and now we're seeing flash flooding likely in some of these areas as the forecast weather center is going to be here or here. The trend has been in this direction. So escaping this, going this way, does not look like the route that it's going to take. But still some time to figure it out. Just a big heads up. Millions of people at risk here, Molly.
A lot of people under the threat as Henri gets closer. Well, a Georgia daycare closed today after flooding forced fire crews to save 27 children and 4 staff members. This happened in Austell in the Atlanta area yesterday. You can see firefighters wading through knee-deep water in the parking lot outside. Storms dropped nearly 3 inches of rain in a matter of hours for the hardest hit neighborhoods in the metro Atlanta area. And parts of the Carolinas also trying to dry out from Fred. 4 people are now dead after high waters swept through Haywood County, North Carolina. That's just west of Asheville. Haywood County Emergency Services now saying 5 people remain missing at this time. Meanwhile, Henri is sending dangerous swells toward the Carolina coast. So Henri not expected to have direct impacts to the Carolinas, but certainly causing some impacts today and in the form of some very rough surf. So there's Henri down there swirling in the Atlantic, and it's pushing some onshore flow into areas of the Carolinas, and that is causing not only some rough surf, but some dangerous rip currents. So if you're taking a vacation out on the beach, trying to fit in some beach time, maybe before you head back, just check with the lifeguard before you get in the water. That's why they're there. They're there to help keep you safe. There's Henri right now. Again, it will not have any direct impacts to the Carolinas or the southeast. It's moving to the north. And meanwhile, in the southeast, we're still expecting some summer downpours continuing. We saw quite a few yesterday. We'll see more again this evening. And then we'll continue to see some stronger storms push through the Tennessee area tomorrow morning, Nashville, all the way down into northern Alabama, continuing throughout the day into Atlanta, as well as Birmingham down into Montgomery, where we could see some stronger storms producing a lot of rainfall in a short amount of time. Just kind of the name of the game in the southeast in the summertime. 1 to 2 inches of rain widespread, but we could see some locally higher amounts, especially where we see those training of thunderstorms. So in Nashville, zoning in on Nashville for this weekend, we will see some hit or miss storms throughout the rest of the evening, but I think mostly we'll have clear skies. Some showers moving in late tonight into very early tomorrow morning, and we'll continue with the thunderstorm threat throughout the day on Saturday, but I really think it's going to be the first half of Saturday that's the trouble for you in Nashville. Chris?
And now we want to go to Chicago here, where we got a nice looking summer day if you have a boat, if you're on the water right now. Otherwise, we got a bit of a scorcher for scooting around here in Chicago. 93 degrees right now. And this kind of weather right here is prime for thunderstorms, and that's something that we're going to have to track and watch in the Midwest, the Northern Plains, and the Central Plains as well. So some of the stronger storms expected here. We got a lot of energy, and that's where storms are firing right now as the front is edging this way, and we're going to see more of it into tonight. Some of the storms that are going to fire have the potential for being severe storms and possibly producing tornadoes. A 2 and a 3 on our exclusive Torcon means there is a tornado threat. The bigger that number, the bigger the threat. But again, if there is a number, there's the possibility we're going to see tornadoes. This is the high-resolution future radar through the rest of this evening, through central Iowa by, after dark, before midnight, I think. And then Twin Cities also has a chance for some thunderstorms. Kansas City, you're going to be before midnight as storms come rumbling through. Now we're in the overnight hours. And into western Illinois by early morning, through the Quad Cities as well. And another way to look at this, going through the afternoon, more showers and storms. We have breaking information right now on Tropical Storm Henri. Just in from the National Hurricane Center as we approach the 5 o'clock hour here. And there you go. The cone has shifted even more to the west. New York City, northern New Jersey in it. It looks very unlikely this will not make landfall. Get ready.
Cover it up. That's what I did when I...
Breaking right now here on the Weather Channel, the latest advisory from Tropical Storm Henri is in, and there are some big developments here. Not so much in the actual meteorology itself. The pressure hasn't changed. The wind speed hasn't changed. Going maybe a little bit faster, but not by much. Still under about 10 miles an hour. It's at 7 miles an hour. One of the big changes, of course, are new warnings that have been posted. Hurricane warnings now up for most of Long Island, including at least the central part all the way out to Montauk. Hurricane warning. So hurricane conditions are possible here. Also coastal areas along Connecticut. We do have hurricane warnings that are up again. These can still change and shift between now and Sunday morning when the weather's really expected to go downhill in a big way. And at this point, it looks like a landfall, while it's now looking likely that this center of the storm will not go over here. As we can see a little bit more of the urgency going up here with tropical storm warnings that are going up again, the hurricane warnings as well. Watches also extending inland, you can see as well, some of the counties going inland. So what's not in this is the rain threat, right? So this is the wind that's going to be the issue here. So this is Tropical Storm Henri's alerts, the hurricane warnings that are up, the hurricane watches, and tropical storm warnings. And as we look, this also includes now the tropical storm watches for much of New Jersey. You can see Staten Island there, Jersey City, also the 5 boroughs in this here. New York City under a tropical storm watch right now. Hurricane warnings in effect for a big majority of Long Island and most of coastal Connecticut here, as conditions are expected to go downhill either late Saturday night into Sunday. So tropical storm conditions when the storm is here is likely to be going on, with the center of the storm forecast to be here. The official forecast is right here. But based on historical errors, it could be anywhere on this line. So, and really, frankly, just kind of anywhere within this bullseye there. But you get the idea. This is going to be a Sunday storm, either a hurricane or a tropical storm for New England and the Northeast. The storm will be working through the Northeast and through New England. This is another part of the story. This will be another chapter of Henri, is the inland threat. Remember Fred making landfall in Florida. Yesterday, we had rain in the Northeast from Fred. We're talking a couple states away from where landfall is expected to happen. This will be moving out as either a blustery and windy system, but regardless, it's going to be a wet one. Again, tropical origins, tropical moisture coming up with this. Surge remains a concern here. Storm surge watches, and I think these ones are warnings. Is that right, Sarah? The ones that yeah. Okay, so we're still getting the update. Again, this is brand new. This is the 5 o'clock advisory, and again, it's a little bit before 5. So all of the data from the National Hurricane Center is still coming in-house, still coming into the building. Our graphics will continue to update, but we're going to see the word warning on here eventually, and we'll break it down to, it looks like perhaps some of the immediate coastal areas. So we'll watch that as well. So threats coming from the ocean, the surge, and then from the air and inland, the fresh water coming down, the rainfall coming down. Europeans going to town here with the rain for upstate New York. This is also including the rain you're going to get out ahead of Henri. The European model shows a whole lot overlapping with where the GFS is. Even if it's this right here, it's still going to be potentially flash flooding situation, a very dangerous threat, of course, Molly.
Well, Chris, we have to talk about what's happening in Haiti after a deadly earthquake. Badly constructed roads are hampering the efforts, but the quake is responsible for killing at least 2,100 people. Grace didn't help matters, bringing tropical downpours shortly thereafter, causing mudslides. The storm has since struck Mexico as a hurricane in the Yucatan Peninsula and is gearing up for a second landfall later tonight. Grace has an appearance on satellite that just kind of makes your heart drop. It's just kind of a bad gut feeling for Grace right now as it continues to intensify, potentially making landfall somewhere between Veracruz up to the Tampico area. We have hurricane warnings and some tropical storm warnings in effect. But look at this. As this intensifies up to 105 miles per hour, so there is still time for intensification prior to making landfall, that would take it up to a Category 2 hurricane. And of course, not only the surge and the wind a threat with this as it pushes on shore, but also the immense rainfall threat, anywhere from 5 to 8 inches of rain. We could see some locally higher amounts in many of these areas, but also it's not just Grace, it's not just Henri. We have another area that we're watching, a wave moving off the coast of Africa right now that has a 20% chance of becoming our next named system. A lot to watch.
Tonight on Weather Underground, Henri taking aim at the Northeast. New York City, Hartford, Providence, Boston, all in harm's way, with Henri strengthening and set to strike this weekend. Everything is on the table with Henri. Huge waves and storm surge, intense winds that will bring down trees and knock out power, and flooding rain that will put neighborhoods underwater. And all of these things could happen well outside of where Henri makes landfall. We detail what you can expect and when.
As Henri nears, the time to prepare is now. We're going to show you the steps that you can take today to help protect you and your family and your property. Plus, severe storms are also ripping across the upper Midwest right now. See the spots where damaging winds and large hail will have you hunkering down tonight. It's all coming up next.
Well, a lot to cover for you tonight right here on Weather Underground. Breaking news with the latest advisory. Hurricane warnings, storm surge warnings now in effect for portions of the Northeast. Thanks for being with us. I'm Mike Bettis.
And I'm Jackie Jarrett. So we want to get right to our hurricane expert, Dr. Rick Knabb, the former director of the National Hurricane Center. And Dr. Knabb, a lot of changes and updates with this advisory.
Yeah, and mainly because we're getting closer and closer to the beginning of the event on Sunday morning, mainly in New England. So now we are just a day and a half away, so it's warning time. Now, Henri is not a hurricane just yet, but that is still a very high likelihood, and that will happen overnight tonight or tomorrow. 70-mile-an-hour tropical storm, and it's moving north-northwest at 7, so you can see it is making that turn. And the pressure's at 994. That's a pretty low pressure for a tropical storm. So it's poised to strengthen. And here's the new track and intensity forecast. Here it is in 24 hours over the very warm waters of the Gulf Stream. Forecast to be an 85-mile-an-hour hurricane, of course, plus or minus. I'm a little concerned about the possibility of somewhere along the line here it intensifying a little more rapidly than forecast. So we got to account for that possibility. Don't rule out that it gets near or at Cat 2. That's just at least something to look out for. Now, it will weaken before coming ashore, but now the latest forecast, which is 48 hours from now, from where the center is forecast to be, is very near the coastline of southern New England as a hurricane. Now, again, that doesn't guarantee it comes ashore as a hurricane, but that's what the forecast is, and then it will slow down and weaken and grow in size. Here is the arrival time expected for winds of tropical storm force. So now we're getting to be roughly a day and a half away. That's when they issue the warnings, about 36 hours before the first arrival of winds of tropical storm force. That means tonight and tomorrow are prep time. And what I just showed you is when the tropical storm force winds will arrive. But now we are expecting, based on the latest forecast, hurricane force winds somewhere in this hurricane warning area, which is about the eastern 2/3 of Long Island and up on the coastline of Connecticut there. We also have tropical storm warning off to the west of there, and you got the hurricane watch that extends inland a little bit from the warning and goes all the way out to Cape Cod and the islands. New York City now under a tropical storm watch. So this is an expansion and an upgrade to a lot of the watches and warnings for the wind hazard. Now, with the water hazard, storm surge warning is now in effect for the danger of life-threatening storm surge getting into much of Long Island and on the south shore of Long Island, getting into Long Island Sound, and then on the south shore of Long Island, about the eastern half of it under the storm surge warning. That goes all the way over to Nantucket, the south-facing area of Cape Cod, and the Cape itself under a storm surge watch. The storm surge watch goes not quite all the way over to New York City, just east of LaGuardia. So you need to be getting out of these coastal areas according to instructions from local officials. Here's a look at the tropical storm. And yes, it still is a little bit sheared, but the storm is starting to breathe a little more. See those cirrus clouds starting to fan out a little more effectively to the north, but the center of circulation is still on the northern side of the convection. So it's still a little bit sheared from north to south, but the overall cloud pattern is getting healthier, unfortunately. And look how close it is to the east coast of the U.S. now in the southeast. It's sending the swells there, so we got the moderate to high risk of rip currents along the coast, and it's begun to make that turn to the north because this trough, look at that low in the middle upper levels of the atmosphere. That's cutting off over the mid-Atlantic and northeast. That's what's bringing it to the north. So there's no doubt about it that it is coming to the north. And so, again, this track has shifted a little bit farther to the west, greatly increasing the chances of landfall of the center right near the tropical storm hurricane threshold. But again, look at that slow motion. There's Sunday afternoon. Here's early Monday morning. Here's Monday afternoon. My goodness, that's a slow motion that lengthens the duration of the winds, increases the damaging potential of those winds, lengthens the duration of the storm surge and waves, and of course, Mike and Jackie, greatly increases the risk of significant rain-induced inland flooding. So we got a day and a half to get ready. We're going to get everybody prepped for the wind and water, coastal and inland.
Also brings those bigger impacts into some of those more populated cities. Now, people on the northeast coast, not necessarily accustomed to preparing for a hurricane tonight. Now they're under hurricane watches and hurricane warnings as Henri makes the turn up towards the north. The Weather Channel's Mike Seidel is live in West Dennis, Massachusetts. And with this more westerly track now, Mike, that's a little bit better with not a direct hit for the Cape. But that said, you're still on the dirty side of the storm.
Yeah, we're still going to have impacts here, but as the track has been shifting west, I talked to folks at the restaurants and here at the hotel, and they're not complaining. But remember, when you shift the track left or right, you take people out of the higher threat zone and put people into the higher threat zone. So now we're thinking we're not going to get a direct hit here on the Cape. But let me show you the track once again, and we can show you this all night long because that's what you want to see, the cone and the track. Remember, the cone widens out over time because statistically we have that error that increases over time. But notice, if you look closely, Cape Cod is not in the cone, but don't read anything into that. We're all under hurricane watches on the Cape, all the way to the coastal areas of Rhode Island. So this whole Cape, North Shore, South Shore, out to Provincetown on the Arm, under a hurricane watch and a storm surge watch. Now, out here, we're expecting a surge of up to 3 to 5 feet because, as Jackie said, we're on the dirty side of the storm. The wind's going to be pushing the water in. We'll get some break here from Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket on the wave action, but still, a surge of 3 to 5 feet is nothing to say, hey, that's not much. No, that's a lot of surge here on Cape Cod. Also some rain, and the winds right now expected to max out about 25 to 30 miles an hour based on the current track. We could have some higher gusts, but with a storm that far away. Meanwhile, today, look at the beaches. Boy, what a beautiful day out here at West Dennis, across the Cape. Thousands. This is high season. The Cape is packed with people, and trust me, they're everywhere. The restaurants are packed. Didn't talk to anybody that's leaving at this point, but the hotels are telling us that some folks that were planning to check in Sunday are not checking in on Sunday. So, Dr. Nab, a better forecast for the Cape, not so good as you get to the west, and we've got the models, and it would seem that the European went towards the GFS today, farther west, because the European all along had been farther east.
Yeah, and what we got to do from this point forward is focus on what impacts are going to occur where. It gets less and less important, the details of the track forecast, and more important, who's under what watch and warning. And we've got hurricane watches all the way out to the Cape. We've got storm surge watches and warnings all the way out to the Cape. So we got some bad weather, dangerous, maybe life-threatening weather if we're not careful to get ready all the way out to the Cape there. So again, here's that new track and intensity forecast, and let's take a look at the models. This cone is simply a representation based on past average errors of where the center of circulation is probably going to go. And it does convey a lot of important things: the strengthening, the slow down, the slow motion, and the eventual exit to the right, but not until Tuesday or Wednesday, and that bend to the left. And it shifted a little bit to the left. But let's take a look at the models again. Here's, that trough that's bringing it north, and that big ridge that will stop it from exiting as it gets caught in that trough. So here is the latest GFS, and you can see how it has that bend to the left toward the coastline because it gets caught in the trough, stopped by the ridge. There's just not a steering current to get it out of here. So that's Sunday. And look at Monday. It hasn't made very much headway at all. Not until Tuesday does it noticeably start to move off to the east. So where it comes ashore is really important. How long it stays in that general area of New England is also very important. So here's the GFS model track. Here are the ensembles. So there are still possibilities of where the center goes that go from New York City to Cape Cod. So don't rule out landfall or the center passing over any of those locations anywhere in between. Now here's the GFS sea level pressure pattern. You notice how large the system is as it after it comes ashore. It will be affecting a large area, so you don't have to be near the center to get bad winds, bad storm surge and waves, and heavy rainfall. That slow motion is really going to add up the rainfall. We'll be talking about that Tuesday. Things finally clear out. Let's take a look at the euro, and there is general agreement in terms of generally where it comes ashore. Confidence in landfall has become very, very high, but also look at that slow motion Sunday and Monday. Look how far inland the low-level spin goes in the euro. So interior New England could be getting a lot of impacts from this. And look at it Tuesday. It has spent 2 days near or over New England after landfall in that euro model because of that slow motion. And when we look at the euro ensembles, it is concerning that so many of them, whoops, let me go back and see if that'll show for me. It's going to display, but right now it has that same kind of spread, New York City to Cape Cod. So, Jackie, we can't take the center of the cone to the bank as where it's going to go, but the size and the slow motion means a lot of New England are going to be experiencing bad impacts regardless of the details of the track.
All right, so let's break down some of these impacts, and let's start out with the wind. The wind field is expected to be expanding, actually, upon approach, which is not good news, Dr. Knapp.
No.
We've got New York City now in a tropical storm watch. Lots of folks could potentially be without power.
Yeah, and this expansion of the wind field that you're talking about is not shown at all on the cone. That doesn't convey it at all. So this is just, again, where the center of circulation is going to go. And it is important, how strong it gets down here will determine, how strong it is up in here. So a stronger hurricane before it crosses the north wall of the Gulf Stream means a stronger storm or hurricane when it makes landfall and sits over New England. So that the next couple of days, I'm really concerned about the possibility of more rapid intensification than what is shown here while it's over those warm waters. Now, because of the expectation that it's going to still be a hurricane when it gets up here into New England, that's why the hurricane warning is up. But look at how far inland and to the east the hurricane watch goes, all the way out to the Cape. So I know you're thinking on the Cape that shift in the track might be good news, but not necessarily. I mean, you're going to be on the right-hand side, the stronger onshore flow side of the storm. So you're still at risk of hurricane conditions all the way out there, and now tropical storm watch all the way over into New York City. Not just because of the expanding size, but because of the meandering motion of the storm once it gets up here into New England. So you take all that into account. Look at how high the chances are. I'm going to draw the line where the greater than 50-50 shot of tropical storm force winds is. That is a big chunk of real estate and a lot of people, and farther interior, your chances are far from zero. So this means a big area that could experience trees coming down, power outages, and making it very, very dangerous to be outside or on the roads. And those winds start Sunday morning. And in addition to tropical storm force winds, a decent chance of hurricane force winds. Look at all these areas, non-zero chance of hurricane force winds. So we have tonight and tomorrow to prepare for the winds, for the power outage. Mike, some key things to be keeping in mind for the power outages, including not lighting candles, not using the generators indoors, and helping out the elderly who might need life-sustaining medical equipment.
All right, Dr. Knapp, thank you so much for that. So certainly surviving the storm is going to be a very big issue for us, that's for sure. So when you're preparing for the wind, what exactly are you looking for here? For a lot of you, you need to make sure that you're doing everything right to protect yourself from that wind and to sustain yourself for that wind. So what you can do is cover your windows with shutters or plywood. Do not tape those windows, okay? That's not going to do you any good. In fact, you could make the glass pieces even bigger. Shelter like you would for a tornado, for instance, okay? And then don't stay in a mobile home or in an unsafe structure. So maybe you're camping in a tent or maybe a trailer or a motorhome, something like that. You want to find safer shelter than that. Don't stay on upper floors of a high-rise because the wind is getting much stronger. The higher up you go with less friction. Consider leaving any unsafe structure, again, like I mentioned, mobile home, any temporary structure, and go find a sturdy structure inland, and preferably away from trees. That would be beneficial, that's for sure. All right, there are a lot of places that can be affected by water as well, another big factor that comes along with this storm. So Henri could be taking aim at places like Atlantic City. Certainly we could have some big swells here. Dr. Knapp, Swells, storm surge, rip currents. Lay it all out for us when it comes to the water.
Yeah, we can't just focus on the wind, can we? That's logical, especially because the advisories have the max sustained winds, the intensity, the category, the watches, the warnings, all that stuff. But we also got to realize that a storm that is going to be in this vicinity, in this area of complex coastline, it is impossible to avoid a significant storm surge event. And even outside, all the way through the weekend, I would be thinking of high risk of rip currents at the beaches, even if you're not in the cone. Here's the storm surge warning. These are the areas for the danger of life-threatening storm surge, the possibility all the way up to the Cape. You got to evacuate or get out as told by local officials. And look at how high the storm surge could be on the south-facing portions of New England, especially these bays that can catch the water, and there will be big-time waves on top of that. Get out of the water areas if your local officials tell you to go.
This
You can't stop a force of nature. This hurricane season, rely on one of your own. It's a fact. No other news network out there is trusted more than the Weather Channel.
This is epic.
Trusted to give you every advantage before the storm. Trusted to be there where and when you need us. Trusted to work around the clock until every threat is over.
We're in this for the long haul.
Because America doesn't trust hurricane season to just anyone.
Welcome back. If you're just joining us, you may not know that New York City now has been put under a tropical storm watch. That's what the latest advisory from the National Hurricane Center is, that tropical storm conditions could be reaching the city. So folks here need to be preparing. They could have some water level rise impacts. They may have some power outages. Those are the types of things that you need to be prepared for. So a lot going on. So we want to give you the latest with Tropical Storm Henri, which is barely a tropical storm, actually a very strong tropical storm with maximum winds at 70 miles per hour. It is forecast to become a hurricane later on tonight or early tomorrow. 70-mile-per-hour winds. That pressure has been kind of holding steady the last couple of hours, but now we're getting more of that northerly pull. Winds were northwest, and now they're north-northwest, and we expect that trend to continue for tonight as well. We've had a lot of changes with the watches and the warnings, so we've got some updates on those as well. So we've got some warnings now in effect for much of Long Island as well as the southern coast of Connecticut. Here's a zoomed-in version of that cone, and you can see how this system just really slows down, unfortunately, upon approach. And I really think in addition to the surge problems as well as wind problems, we're likely going to have a lot of rainfall. And keep in mind, we've just recently had Tropical Storm Fred move across this region. So we want to bring in meteorologist Mike Bettis. Mike, I know you've been tracking all of this. Massachusetts, especially in the parts of the Northeast, were hit really hard yesterday.
The thing about it is their ground is really saturated right now. We can't underestimate the threats, what they'll be with Henri. You know, this week, Fred brought some really drenching rain. It triggered a flash flood emergency in places like Haywood County, North Carolina. Then it just moved north after that. You know, 4 people died in a flash flood event here, 5 people still unaccounted for. And so you roll that thing north and it goes right into New England, right? And it became a rainmaker there as well. That's because it combined with kind of another system, and it just flooded us over and over and over again. This is Thursday in Boston. They haven't had really a chance to dry out. Flash flooding could be a big concern for us here. You know, folks were like chasing their trash in the recycling bins and everything else, right? what an absolute mess. But what this means is we're kind of predisposed at this point for flooding because we had so much recently this week. So what we're showing you here is a map that has a lot of colors on it, right? Northeast, all these colors correlate to a specific, I'm going to try to get that back there, a specific amount of water that we've seen, okay? And so ultimately, there are some spots here in New England, Connecticut, Massachusetts. We've had some big-time rain here, folks. 3 to 5 inches of rain has come our way. Now you see where the cone and the track comes. Center comes right like this, which means you're going to get absolutely soaked with rain again. So, Dr. Nab, when it comes to the flood threat here, I feel like we're definitely going to see a repeat of what we just saw with Fred. And if the slow motion has anything to do with it, it could be even worse.
I fear it probably will be worse overall. Now, it won't necessarily be that the same places that flooded with Fred will flood again and flood worse. It could be a different spot. But I think overall, the flood risk is greater in this situation. Fred was what was left of a tropical storm, and it was moving along. This slow motion is extremely, extremely concerning. So one way to answer the question is, well, what category is this going to be when it gets to New England? Well, it could be a strong tropical storm or a Cat 1 hurricane. Got hurricane warnings up. But you can also think of it as category slow. Really, really slow motion, just inching along at 3, 4, 5 miles an hour. Now, when the tropical storm force winds arrive, that's about when the rain will be heavy and will start. But you'll have some peripheral rains, tomorrow night into Sunday morning, but it won't be nearly as bad as will start happening on Sunday night into Monday. And I would be surprised if this risk doesn't expand and maybe go up. Could we be looking at a high risk day from WPC somewhere along the line Sunday or Monday? That's a possibility. This doesn't even look into daytime Monday night, when the rainfall problem will still be ongoing because Henri will not have completely departed yet. And the rainfall totals that are forecast by the global models are highly track dependent. And what structure the model puts in there won't necessarily be exactly right, but it will show you some things that are possible. Not only do we have the possibility of heavy rains in the metro areas, but look at how far inland the Euro has flooding rains. In the GFS, which is a track a little farther to the east, goes inland quite a ways as well. So, Jackie, I am really concerned about what could be a big-time inland flooding problem, along with the possibility of that wet soil making trees easier to bring down.
Yes, this is a densely forested area. When we take a look at this map, Dr. Nab, you can really see how the coverage of trees is really dense in this area. So the ground is already saturated. On top of that, we've got more rain coming in as well. Most tree roots are somewhere between about 1.5 to 2 feet below the surface. So once that soil gets loose, it will take less wind than normal to topple the trees. So that means more power outages and damage. The most populous city in America now in the bullseye for tropical storm impacts thanks to Henri. Now, the first time the Weather Service in New York has issued a hurricane warning in a decade. The last time they did that was from Irene in August of 2011. So New York City now under a tropical storm watch. There's also a storm surge watch in effect for the Bronx and for northern parts of Queens. All right, the time to get prepared is now. Welcome back to Weather Underground. I'm meteorologist Jackie Jarris.
I'm meteorologist Mike Bettis. A lot to cover for you here, folks, as we watch what's going on here with Henri. Could it strengthen the hurricane? That's the forecast, so it's going to get stronger, we believe, before it eventually moves straight for the Northeast here. Long Island could be affected, right through New England as well, and yes, New York City as well. Take a look, by the way. Since Irene, this was 2011. This was a decade ago. And last time we had a direct landfall from a hurricane was Bob back in 1991. You can see that places, there's a very colorful map, right? So a lot of tropical storm watches, warnings, hurricane watches and warnings out there. But again, the last time that we saw that warning issued by the Weather Service there was Irene in August of 2011. Dr. Nab, correct me if I'm wrong, that was your first stint here at the Weather Channel, right?
Oh, yes.
And now here we go again.
Yes, during Hurricane Irene, I was definitely here at the Weather Channel. And one thing that we didn't have to show on the air during Irene was storm surge watches and warnings and forecast values for storm surge flooding. We've got that this time, and a good thing because we've got storm surge warnings in addition to hurricane warnings. Henri, not quite yet a hurricane, but that will change, if not tonight, tomorrow, because the conditions are getting more and more conducive. It's just poised to strengthen as it's making that turn north-northwest motion now. And that will be moving toward generally the north over the next couple of days. And that really warm water tonight, tomorrow night, before it crosses the north wall of the Gulf Stream, it could get stronger than that 85 miles an hour. Intensity forecasts are not perfect. And if the conditions get just right, and it looks like they will for about a day and a half, it could get pretty strong. Now, it will weaken before it makes landfall, but it will be really close to that tropical storm hurricane threshold. The explicit forecast from the Hurricane Center has it right at that hurricane threshold at landfall. That doesn't guarantee that's what will happen, but it could be a little weaker, a little stronger, but strong tropical storm, Cat 1 hurricane, not a whole lot of difference. And then that slow motion after landfall. We'll spend a couple days near or over New England. But we got to get ready by Sunday morning, because that's when the winds of tropical storm force and the heavy rains will start. So that's why we're in the warning phase, about 36 hours out. And so tonight and tomorrow are really critical prep times. And then it'll move inland from there. So here's where the hurricane warnings are in effect. It includes eastern 2/3 of Long Island. And there's tropical storm watches for New York City. The hurricane watch, it goes all the way out to the Cape. And look at the chances of tropical storm force winds in New York City. It's right around 50-50. So could that go to tropical storm warning later? That's a distinct possibility, Jackie.
All right, heads up on that for sure for New York City. Well, with millions of people now potentially in harm's way, we want to get you caught up to speed with what we know. In Massachusetts, the governor is asking residents to avoid travel this weekend, especially around the Cape and the islands. The National Guard in Massachusetts is on standby for high water rescues, debris clearing, and public safety support. All state campgrounds, pools, and coastal beaches in Massachusetts are closed through at least Sunday. Now, the governor is telling everyone to stay home here, and if you have plans to be at the Cape, delay it. The Weather Channel's Mike Seidel is live in West Dennis, Massachusetts, where they're getting ready for a storm that they haven't really seen in decades. Mike, what's the latest there? People pretty aware and concerned there?
They're very aware, they're concerned, but they're happy to see that the track has shifted west over the past 36 hours. And as Mike Bettis mentioned, Bob was really the last real impactful storm here. In fact, the hotel we were staying at here had about 7 feet of water coming right up under the building. Let me show you what they were doing today. Storm preps, getting the boats out of the water. Not everybody, but this bunch of guys pulled the boat out just around the corner at the West Dennis Harbor Yacht Club. So they're getting the boats out of the water with good measure. But not everybody is pulling their boat out, like this gentleman.
Well, since the storm is going to go in around Newport, Rhode Island, we're planning on leaving the boat in. And we're going to tie down the lines, put more lines on her, more fenders, and we're going to weather out the storm. But if the track changes, we'll be pulling the boat either tomorrow morning or tomorrow afternoon.
This is the time to do the storm preps tonight and tomorrow, especially coastal Long Island, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and here in the Cape. More coverage around the clock from the Weather Channel.
You want to make pizza night with the family even better? Bam! Get yourself the new Parmesan crusted papadilla. It's like a golden, crispy little fireworks show in your mouth. Get a new Parmesan crusted papadilla for only $7. Papa John's.
Allergies with nasal congestion overwhelming you? Breathe more freely with powerful Claritin D. Claritin D improves nasal airflow 2 times more than the leading allergy spray at hour 1. Claritin D. Get more airflow.
Ugh, is there a natural litter that actually works?
At Tidy Cats, Litterventions come naturally. Naturally strong unscented with activated charcoal or scented clean lemongrass with plant extracts. 100% natural, 100% powerful. There's a Tidy Cats for that.
Tums versus mozzarella stick.
When heartburn hits, fight back fast with Tums Chewy Bites. Fast heartburn relief in every bite. Crunchy outside, chewy inside. Tums Chewy Bites.
Think of what peanuts have given humanity. Fuel for vast migrations, sustenance for mountaineering expeditions and long journeys across the world. But most importantly, they give us something to eat when we drink beer. Planters, a nut above.
Our strength, our power, our purpose starts within. So let's start there. with collagen that supports our body from the inside out.
At Napa, we keep things moving. If it has wheels and an engine, we help keep it on the road. And if it's on the road, we have parts for it. And if you need a part, you can get it fast. At Napa, when we're not thinking about cars, we're thinking about the people who drive them. Because when it comes to serving you and our community, our motor never quits.
It took a while to get up here. We started out around 1959.
Then we took a hard left in East Africa.
A right at Baja. A 180 in the empty quarter. And that 65-degree incline at Hell's Revenge. A few million miles later, and voila. But we didn't do all that just to get here. We did it to give you a truck that'll take you anywhere. This is the new Nissan.
I've got moderate to severe plaque psoriasis. Now, there's Sky Rizzy.
Things are getting clearer. I feel free to bare my skin. Yeah, that's all me. Nothing and me go hand in hand. Nothing on my skin. That's my new plan. Nothing is everything.
Achieve clearer skin with Sky Rizzy. 3 out of 4 people achieve 90% clearer skin at 4 months. Of those, nearly 9 out of 10 sustained it through 1 year. And Sky Rizzy is 4 doses a year after 2 starter doses.
I see nothing in a different way. It's my moment, so I just gotta say, nothing is everything.
Skyrizi may increase your risk of infections and lower your ability to fight them. Before treatment, your doctor should check you for infections and tuberculosis. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms, such as fevers, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or coughs, or if you plan to or recently received a vaccine.
Nothing is everything.
Now is the time to ask your dermatologist about Skyrizi.
Named the world's most accurate forecaster, the Weather Channel.
Welcome back, everyone, as we follow Henri for you tonight, taking aim at the Northeast. We have hurricane warnings have been posted. New York City is now in the forecast cone as well. 70-mile-per-hour tropical storm. We're anticipating this to become a hurricane. Could happen as soon as this evening. 290 miles south-southeast of Cape Hatteras, North Carolina. Likely to bypass the Carolinas here in the mid-Atlantic coast and go right for the Northeast. It looks like all the steering currents are pushing in that direction, but we've got a pretty well-formed system at this point. There's a look at the zoomed-in cone, and you follow down the center point of that cone. It comes right through Long Island, right through Hartford, takes a bit of a right hook here, but it slows down along the way. So once it gets in to, say, Long Island, the slow movement now poses a lot of issues here. Prolonged exposure to wind, prolonged exposure to storm surge, prolonged exposure to everything, truly, including the very heavy rain. But if you notice here, by Sunday afternoon, evening, still a 75-mile-per-hour Category 1 hurricane. Could it be a hurricane at landfall? Not ruling that out at all. Once it interacts with land, it should begin to weaken. The unfortunate thing is we could be dealing with this, may not even emerge off the coast of Maine here until Tuesday, which would mean we would be in this for 3 days. Jackie, it's hard to understand what could happen over the course of 3 days with slow movement and a really heavy rainmaker here.
Yeah, with that 5 o'clock advisory, things really got real, I think, for a whole lot of folks. And that includes all of you right here in the nation's most populous city in America. There we see New York City. You've got the clouds right now, but fairly calm conditions. You're under a tropical storm watch. This is the first time in a decade since you've been under some of these tropical alerts. So it's been a while since people have had to prepare for this. We want to bring in our hurricane expert, Dr. Rick Knabb. And Dr. Knabb, you know, they get water level rise in New York City. They're surrounded by water here. On top of that, we could be talking about really heavy rainfall for the city and, of course, some strong winds.
Yeah, and I want to urge everybody in the New York City area not to tune out on this and say, okay, tropical storm watch, it means that we might get some tropical storm winds. I'm not that concerned about it. That could change. That could go to tropical storm warning. And oh, by the way, you are right on the edge of the storm surge watch. that could shift to the west as well. So, being in the cone or out of the cone isn't as important as what watch or warning you're under and what conditions you could expect. And also, that bend to the left means that you are also in an area that could get some very heavy rain and flooding. So look at the tropical storm watch goes here over to the New York City area, and the hurricane warning is only a little bit to your east. If there are any further changes to the left, that could change. You got to at least allow for that possibility. And also, look at how far west that storm surge watch goes. It doesn't quite include LaGuardia Airport, but that could change. Tonight and tomorrow, you've got to stay tuned to us to see what changes to the forecast there are. And by the way, even though you're not under the storm surge watch, we still could get 1 to 3 feet of storm surge flooding above normally dry ground, including the possibility of that happening up into the New York City area. Now look at these wind speed probabilities. In New York City, your chances have been going up. So here's 5, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, greater than 50-50 shot of sustained winds of tropical storm force. And New York City is a complex area. This is just what the sustained winds could be at ground in a normal kind of exposure. But you got to consider, you got high rises there, and when the winds start on Sunday morning, they could be stronger in some parts of New York City because of the wind funneling between the buildings. And Mike and Jackie, when you go up 25, 30 stories, you're buying yourself a lot stronger winds. Say it's a Cat 1 hurricane at the ground, you get Cat 2 hurricane up in the high rise. So if you get tropical storm, even low-end tropical storm at the ground in New York City, you could be talking strong tropical storm several stories up.
Yeah, I think, Dr. Nab, a lot about what threat could it cause to people that live in New York, but I also think about what about just the general inconveniences that it caused, but the heavy rain that's coming in, we've seen it play out time and time again. The subways that everybody uses fill up with water. They're unusable. We could have some significant power outages in New York as well.
Yeah, there could be power and maybe water outages depending on how bad of a wind event you have. So imagine being wherever it is you live and you're stuck there with maybe there be some debris out there and the power's out and you're essentially stuck inside your home where you live. I would not be sheltering near windows in those upper floors of the high rise. I would make sure I have supplies to get through not just the storm that could last a couple days because it's going to be a slow mover, but the aftermath, and be thinking about looking in on your elderly friends and family members, because if there's a power outage, they might need extra help. And Jackie, they might need to be near medical care. So we got to take tonight and tomorrow to plan in places like New York City, because it's a complex environment where the winds could be a little stronger and flooding in urban areas is a big risk.
Yeah, and anybody who has plans to visit New York City this weekend needs to change their plans as well. Of course, we're going to get back to our hurricane expert, Dr. Rick Knabb, and talk more about these impacts. But right now, we want to head out to Mike Seidel in Massachusetts.
Hey, Jackie, Cape Cod under a hurricane watch and a storm surge watch. This water is going to be a lot choppier come late tomorrow night and Sunday. Continuing coverage and crews spread out across southern New England. Welcome back to the Cape Cod, Massachusetts. I'm meteorologist Mike Seidel. Sun going down 7:33 tonight. Boy, the days are getting shorter up here and across the northern hemisphere. This is the Atlantic. It's pretty calm right now. That's going to change in a big way tomorrow night and Sunday as Henri, whether it's a hurricane or tropical storm, likely stays to our west. We're going to be farther east, but we're going to be on the dirty side of the storm. Means we're going to have an issue with surge. We have a storm surge watch for the South Shore here, up to 3 to 5 feet of storm surge. And there is a hurricane watch for all of Cape Cod, a hurricane watch. There will be some rain, but I'm thinking at this point, if you're worried about flooding, flash flooding, and heavy rainfall, it's not going to be so much here on the Cape, Dr. Nab. It's going to be in western and central Massachusetts. And remember, they just had flash flooding in some of those areas just the past couple of days from the remnants of Fred. But down here, based on the current track, we're not going to get nearly the amount of rain they're going to get to the west and farther inland.
Yeah, that's if that track exactly holds. And Mike, I know you've been talking to some folks, and they feel, it seems like they're conveying to you that they feel comfortable that the track has shifted to the west. But I'm real concerned about like the south-facing shore, Barnstable and Falmouth and Buzzards Bay. I mean, they're under hurricane watch, but they're also under a storm surge warning. And the onshore flow, like you said, the dirty side, that guy who's got the boat and people who might be thinking of riding it out if they're told to evacuate, I'm really concerned about those folks because they're going to be on that stronger onshore flow side.
Yeah, the storm surge forecast right now, 3 to 5 feet, is higher here.
Yeah.
And like you said, down towards coastal Rhode Island than it is in Long Island Sound, parts of coastal Connecticut, albeit 2 to 4 feet. So, yeah, we still have the surge is a big concern here. But with this current track forecast, hurricane force winds seem unlikely. They're going to be more relegated to Long Island, coastal Connecticut, and maybe Rhode Island in gusts.
Yeah, and then what we got to do is convince people that tropical storm force winds are bad and can take out the power and take down trees, even if it's not hurricane. So let's break all this down.
Exactly.
Yeah, let's break all this down and show you where you live, what hazards we're concerned about. And again, the track of the center, that's what the cone shows. It's probably going to be within there, but we can't, number one, we can't take it to the bank that it's going to go down right down the center. And the center of circulation for what's going to be a large hurricane and then tropical storm, the center of circulation isn't the only center of action. You could be getting life-threatening wind and water at the coast and inland, even if the center doesn't go very close to you. And again, we're talking to get ready by Sunday morning. That's when the tropical storm force winds and the heavy rain will start. And again, hurricane watch, the chances, yes, are less out here than in the hurricane warning, but they're not zero. And there's also, if you've got a hurricane watch, that could be changed to tropical storm warning later if it doesn't go to hurricane warning. Very high chance of tropical storm conditions out on the Cape and the islands. So it's not just about where the track is going to go. Look at that. I mean, if you are anywhere in the state of Massachusetts, you've got a greater than 50-50 shot of getting sustained winds of tropical storm force. And now about the storm surge warning. You've got Narragansett Bay, Buzzards Bay, Falmouth and Barnstable. These areas are under a storm surge warning. That is the danger of life-threatening saltwater flooding. So you got to pay attention to what the local officials are telling you to do. Evacuate if told to do so. You don't want to leave cars and boats. If this is going to be the onshore flow side, so they're going to have not just storm surge, but damaging waves. So you really got to be thinking about getting your boat to a safe place. And you got tonight and tomorrow to do that. And look at the storm surge forecast, like Mike and I were just talking about. The highest storm surge forecast values. This is storm surge flooding above normally dry ground. The highest values are expected somewhere in that area east of the track. So if you're in that area and you're vulnerable to storm surge and waves, you don't want to be happy that the track of the center of the cone is over to your west, because that puts you in the greatest chances of getting the life-threatening storm surge and the damaging waves. But that possibility goes far to the west as well. This is incorporating all the uncertainty in track intensity and size. And just to show you that it's not all about where the center goes, look at the size of this circulation on Sunday morning as it's coming ashore, if the GFS is exactly right, and look at how much of you all the way out to the Cape are on that strong side, and the circulation goes all the way into New York City and beyond. So, Jackie, we got to treat this as the big beast that it's going to be, not just a track online on a map.
Yeah, and there's so much information to get through tonight, so make sure you stay with us as our live coverage of Henri continues next. We're going to break down the threats, what you need to do now to prepare for the storm, and why falling trees is a huge concern. Plus, we've got severe storms rumbling across the Midwest tonight. We'll have a look at who could see tornadoes. We've got watches that are in effect. We'll break that down.
Band practice, soccer.
Tonight on Weather Underground, Henri takes aim at the Northeast. New York City, Hartford, Providence, Boston, all in harm's way, with Henri strengthening and set to strike this weekend. And everything is on the table. Huge waves, storm surge, intense winds that'll bring down trees and knock out power, and flooding rain that will put neighborhoods underwater. And all these things could happen well outside of where Henri makes landfall. We'll detail what you can expect and when.
As Henri nears, the time to prepare is now. We're going to show you the steps that you can take to help protect you, your family, and your property. Plus, severe storms are also ripping across the Midwest right now. See the spots where damaging winds, large hail will all have you hunkering down tonight. It's all coming up next on Weather Underground.
Oh, we've got so much to cover for you tonight with the latest advisory. We have hurricane warnings now and storm surge warnings in effect for the Northeast. New York City now in the forecast cone. Thanks for being with us for extended coverage of Henri. I'm Mike Bettis.
I'm Jackie Jarris. We want to get right to our hurricane expert and former director of the National Hurricane Center, Dr. Rick Knapp. Dr. Knapp, I'm sure a lot of new viewers are joining us right now, and there's so much to get through with that newest advisory.
Yeah, and I want to remind everybody that not only are the forecasters and the director and folks at the Hurricane Center putting out these advisories, as soon as they hit the button on that advisory, you know what they're doing right after that, and they're probably continuing to do right now, is they are briefing emergency managers, the FEMA Hurricane Liaison Team, and probably even briefing the White House. So this is a all-hands-on-deck communication effort down there at the Hurricane Center, and their forecasts are just part of what they do. And on this latest advisory, they set the maximum winds at 70 miles an hour. Not yet quite a hurricane, but their forecast continues to call for strengthening tonight and tomorrow night as it gets under weak wind shear and moves over very warm waters until it leaves the north wall of the Gulf Stream. And after that, it's not just going to go away, but it will become a slower moving, larger system, even though it'll weaken a little bit. Their latest forecast has it right at that hurricane tropical storm threshold as it's coming ashore Sunday afternoon. So that's why we've got the hurricane warnings up. And you notice how slow that motion is after it gets to northeast. It's like it moves along, and then when it gets to the northeast, it loses its oomph in terms of forward motion and hangs around for a couple of days. Once the winds of tropical storm force and the heavy rain start on Sunday morning, then we're going to be dealing with this for a couple of days up in New England. So we've got to prepare tonight and tomorrow and go to bed tomorrow night in your safe place with your supplies ready to deal with it as it arrives Sunday morning, because we got to get through the storm and the aftermath and the power outages and all of that. Hurricane warnings now up for the eastern two-thirds of Long Island, a good portion of the coastline of Connecticut. Hurricane watches go all the way eastward to Cape Cod and the islands, and New York City under a tropical storm watch, portions of western Long Island under a tropical storm warning. So a lot of you at risk for damaging, dangerous winds that we got to prepare for. And it's not just at the immediate coastline. Look at how far inland in New England the risk of tropical storm force goes. So we got to deal with not just coastal impacts and a non-zero chance of hurricane force winds out on the Cape, even getting close to New York City. So possibility of the changes to those watches and warnings. The other big thing that changed at 5 p.m., storm surge warning from just east of New York City, all of Long Island Sound from the rest of their east side of the southern facing shores of Long Island, and those storm surge warnings go all the way through Narragansett Bay, Buzzards Bay, south-facing shores of Cape Cod, where we could have the greatest storm surge flooding. So we got a day and a half to prepare, Jackie, and we got to take everybody through hazard by hazard and what they can do about it.
Yeah, it's not a lot of time. And, you know, it's been a while since people on the Northeast coast have had to prepare for a hurricane or tropical storm. And they're now under watches and warnings as Henri makes the turn farther up towards the north. Now, the Weather Channel's Mike Seidel is live in West Dennis, Massachusetts. And, Mike, this latest forecast has it a little off towards your west, which puts you in better shape overall. But still, on the dirty side of the storm, real concerned about storm surge there.
Yeah, I think the number one concern right now is storm surge, because we're going to get a surge expected of 3 to 5 feet. You can see where we're standing here. That's the Atlantic looking almost due south, and we're not more than 5 or 6 feet above the sea level, the water level right now. So that is a concern here. One thing is for sure, though, it has shifted west, so that lowers our winds, and it also lowers the amount of rainfall. No rain today, not expecting any rain tomorrow. Look at the beautiful day we had today on the Cape. This area out here, the whole Cape is packed. It's high season. August schools in the Northeast don't start until at least the day after Labor Day, so everybody's out here vacationing in the water. By the way, water temps here are mid-70s, and we're talking about the cooler water. Yeah, 75, 76, not bad. I can handle, a lot of people can handle that, but we're not talking 80 or 85 like in the Gulf Stream. So that's why we think that's going to start to weaken Henri before it makes landfall, at least a little bit. Meanwhile, the governor of Massachusetts, Charlie Baker, at the microphone today talking about the storm and what you should be doing.
And due to the current track of the hurricane, we're strongly recommending that all travelers delay any trips to the Cape and the islands, possibly until Monday when the storm moves out. Additionally, those currently visiting the Cape and islands this week should consider leaving the Cape on Saturday or find a way to make plans to stay until Monday or Tuesday.
Good point there. Most people that are here are going to stay till Sunday. There are folks that have checked called into some of these hotels and said they're canceling their trip out here on Sunday. Sunday is going to be the worst day by far. Again, winds could gust 35 to 40 miles an hour based on the current track, Dr. Nab. And the storm surge is going to be the #1 issue at this point based on the current forecast track. But as we know, the models, they oscillate. We have the spaghetti with the lines all over the place. Right now, we're kind of zeroing in on Long Island and coastal Connecticut, but that could change in the next 36 hours.
Yeah, I agree. The biggest problem where you're standing is going to be the storm surge and the waves, and then tropical storm force winds, power outages, a distinct possibility even without hurricane force winds. Now, let's take a look at what the models are doing and help you understand what still could change and why this is going to be such a long duration event. Look at how slow the track forecast is after it gets to New England. That's one of the biggest problems here. And that is why so much of interior New England has a decent chance of tropical storm force winds, in addition to the tropical storm and hurricane warning areas, and still a greater than 50-50 shot out on the Cape of tropical storm conditions, as is the case in New York City. So a lot of you are going to get strong winds, and that is despite whatever changes happen in the exact track. So let's take a look at what the models are doing here. They're responding, and so is the storm, obviously, to this cutoff low over the eastern U.S. that's going to bring Henri north. It's already starting to feel the tug of that. And here is the latest GFS, the colors of the low-level spin of Henri. And here you see the big ridge that's going to stop the northward motion. Once it gets to New England, here's the trough that's bringing it to New England. And because of that configuration of the trough, it's going to kind of bend it into the coastline. So here we are in a couple of days. On Sunday, it's over New England. And then on Monday, it'll still be over New England, maybe even interior New England. So that spending a couple of days over New England is why it's going to lengthen the duration of the winds until finally Tuesday it's exiting. And that long stay over New England means heavy rainfall will really add up the totals. And also, as it weakens after leaving the Gulf Stream, it's going to get horizontally larger. So that makes the cone and the track of the center even less helpful to describing who's going to get what winds. And that's why Mike and I are talking about how tropical storm conditions are still a greater than 50-50 shot out on the Cape, because you're going to be on the right-hand side, the stronger side of a larger storm. So just because you're not where the center is going to go doesn't mean you couldn't get some of the strongest winds, even though the very strongest winds will probably be closer to the center with the hurricane force winds, but that size is going to expand the wind field from the Cape over to New York City possibly. And look at this size of a storm going slowly Large and slow means a long duration of wind and surge, but Jackie, it also means a tremendous amount of rainfall. So I don't like the trends in the models.
Yeah.
Very slow and over New England for a couple of days.
Yeah, I don't like it either. The 5 o'clock advisory really, I think, helped put things into perspective, just how serious some of these threats are. You know, Dr. Knapp, let's talk more about individual threats, and we'll start with the wind. You mentioned the wind field expanding. You mentioned that it's going to be lingering here. Now, a little bit of good news is that maybe the winds will die down a little bit, even though it's lingering, because at least it's over land. But with an expansive wind field, I mean, we're talking the big cities getting in on power outages and perhaps trees down. So let's talk about how far out we need to be concerned about those wind threats.
Yeah, and the fact that it will be weakening as it approaches New England and stays over New England, that doesn't lessen a whole lot the risk of downed trees, power outages, very dangerous conditions outside, danger driving, because you remember, this is going to become a hurricane, a Cat 1, maybe even Cat 2 before it leaves the warm waters, and how strong it gets down here will have a lot to do with how strong it is up in here. But the Hurricane Center's forecasting it right near that tropical storm hurricane threshold as it's arriving in New England. And then, yes, it will weaken, but then the wind field will expand, and tropical storm force winds sustained for a day or more. That really amps up the possibilities of downed trees and power outages, and trees coming down can take lives if you're not sheltering like you would for a tornado. So it's not just the hurricane warning area we're concerned about, the hurricane watch areas that could be converted to either the hurricane or tropical storm warning, the tropical storm watch areas that could go to tropical storm warning. These are dangerous conditions, especially this time of year with fully leafed trees. And interior New England, not just the coastal areas and the big cities, at risk for damaging and power outage taking strong tropical storm force winds. This is for sustained winds. And there's a non-zero chance of hurricane force winds, even out to the Cape, even over to the doorstep of New York City. So there could be changes to those watches and warnings. And we got to get ready by Sunday morning when those winds and the heavy rains start. And Mike, we got to take the time between now and Sunday morning to safely get through the storm and what could be a long, nasty aftermath without power.
100%, Dr. Knapp. I mean, we have some tips here to help you survive the storm, making sure that you're ready, make sure your home is ready, to make sure you can get through this as painlessly as possible, right? So just think about protecting your home initially, all right? Cover your windows with shutters or plywood. Do not use tape. That's not going to help you at all. So you got to have something sturdy that's going to take the wind and maybe debris that flies towards it. Shelter like you would, say, for a tornado, where you're going to find the sturdiest part of your home to shelter in. For a lot of you, that can be the first floor of your home inside an interior room. You know, set up almost like a picnic for the kids, or blankets and pillows and stuff like that, flashlights, everything you need ready in one solid place, away from windows, away from exterior walls, where you feel like you're in a safe spot. Also, don't stay in a mobile home. It's a very unsafe shelter for you to be in. Mobile home is not sturdy. It does not have really good sound structure to it. And don't stay on upper floors of maybe a high-rise. So we're talking about a very populated place here in the Northeast. New York, a lot of people live in high-rises. The higher up you go, the higher the winds will be, and you want to stay away from those windows. And consider leaving any unsafe structure that you might be in. You know, if you're out here maybe doing some camping, you're going to be doing, you know, you've got like the motorhome or the RV. Those are not safe places to be. So you'll want to evacuate, or you want to find another sturdy shelter. Now, if you lose power, which is very possible here, do not operate a generator indoors. Outdoors only, with the exhaust pointed away from your home. Do not use candles or anything with an open flame. Stay away from downed power lines at least 30 feet away. If they're live, call 911 and have a plan to power your life-sustaining medical equipment. And we certainly know that another big threat from Henri is going to be the water conditions, and that can include places like, you know, Atlantic City. Yeah, we could be, you know, on the western side of a big swells could come our way, however, big rip currents could come our way, erosion at the beaches here. Dr. Knapp, let's talk now the water here, the surge, the swells, the rip currents. What are the dangers?
Well, the whole East Coast is going to feel it, at least with the high risk of rip currents and rough surf, all the way down to Florida as this passes by. But the farther north you get, the greater chance you have of really high waves and eventually up here in New England, the storm surge. With a hurricane and a tropical storm affecting this area, there's no doubt we're going to have storm surge and waves. Storm surge warning means the danger of life-threatening saltwater flooding anywhere from just east of New York City, most of Long Island Sound, eastern half of the southern shore of Long Island, and you're talking Narragansett Bay, Buzzards Bay, Falmouth, Barnstable, the whole south-facing Cape Cod area, and the Sound there. And how much water are we talking about? The highest waters actually be to the east of the track, because that's where the onshore flow is going to be. 3 to 5 feet of saltwater flooding above normally dry ground is expected somewhere in that area. 2 to 4 feet in much of Long Island, both the Sound and the Atlantic side. Even 1 to 3 feet on the Jersey Shore is expected somewhere in that area, getting up into the New York City area. And there will be really, really high, crushing waves, especially on that eastern side. And I want to show you why this is going to be such a storm surge producer. And oh, by the way, while we're showing that, on the Delmarva and Jersey Shore on Saturday, before the weather gets really bad farther north, that hurricane's going to be right offshore. The waves and the rip current and the surf risk will be terrifically high, even though the weather might be good to lull you to go to the beach. But then when you get this large system, even though it might be weakening, this is going to be a storm surge and wave producer, pushing it into the Sound and into those areas east of track. Jackie?
Well, as New England prepares for the first direct hit from a hurricane in 30 years, you probably have some questions, and we are here to answer them. Send them to us on Facebook or Twitter. Be sure to include the hashtag Hurricane Questions, and we're going to answer them for you right here during our show tonight. Stay with us.
Evacuate immediately. Oh no. Go, go! Oh.
All eyes on the latest with Tropical Storm Henri, set to become a hurricane likely later tonight or tomorrow. You're looking live at New York City. And New York, if you're just joining us, you may not have heard that you were just put under a tropical storm watch now. This happened about an hour or so ago. And the Bronx, northern Queens, you are under storm surge watches as well. So what this tells us is that track has shifted a little farther off towards the west. You are going to get in on some of those expansive, damaging winds, potentially also have some heavy rainfall impacts and perhaps that surge. So here's the latest right now on Tropical Storm Henri, packing winds around 70 miles per hour. Keep in mind, it only has to go up to 74 for this to be a hurricane, so we're not too far off of that already. This is moving now in more of a north-northwesterly direction. It had been moving northwest, and now we're starting to see that pull farther to the north, keeping a solid solidly in the impact zone with a direct hit, likely on Long Island or perhaps into southern parts of New England. Here's a look at where the tropical storm warnings and hurricane warnings and watches have been issued now. So it's about the eastern 2/3 of Long Island for the hurricane warning, as well as the coast of Connecticut. And then we've got watches outside of that, including you across the Massachusetts coastline, all the way extending out towards the Cape. Here's the latest cone. So if you haven't joined us since this morning, this is an adjustment. This is a little bit of a shift. And there you can see it is expected to move in farther off towards the west. Now, it still could come in either side of that center line. So don't focus on the center line because impacts will be felt far outside of that cone. And then notice kind of that little light bulb shape or that bulb shape down the line. What that tells us is that this is going to be slowing down. This is going to be a problem, especially with all of the rainfall across this area. So, Mike, you know, we just had Fred go through this area, unfortunately, saturated in the ground. And with more rain on the way, it's not good news for some folks here.
It really is, and Jackie, we really cannot underestimate the threats that come with Henri. You know, when we had Fred that came through, it just drenched the eastern half of the country and really had big issues down in North Carolina here in Haywood County. 4 people died in the flash flood. Another 5 people are still unaccounted for. And then Fred moved from here, where it just triggered awful flash flooding, up into Connecticut, where we had flash flooding here. This is West Hartford. The remnants of the storm at this point dumped about 3.5 inches of rain on Thursday alone. Now Henri is taking aim at the same areas and potentially producing even more rain. So what we thought we'd do is give you a detailed picture of how Fred set the stage for Henri, unfortunately, and may make Henri even worse. So the map that you see here is a map of the northeast United States. A lot of the green is rain less than 3 inches, but a lot of yellow on this map indicating 3 to 5 inches of rain. Orange indicates 5 or more. And then we've overlaid the track of Henri. And really a heavy swath of rain happened between, say, Hartford, Worcester, and Boston. So the ground's really soaked right now. And if you follow that center track, you see where it ends up going, all right? So Sunday evening, Monday morning, Monday evening, Tuesday morning. So we've got a long duration rain event here, Dr. Knapp, on top of already really soaked ground. This is a really bad scenario.
It is. Now, one big lesson that we learned that you just helped everybody understand is that tropical moisture with complex terrain in like North Carolina and up in Massachusetts, bad mix. And we could have some of that going on in interior New England. Now, this is just for Sunday night into Monday morning. This risk could expand and could be upgraded and will likely last into Monday night, and Tuesday. Look at how many of you are at risk for flash flooding, not just at the coast, but going inland as well. The latest Euro model is very concerning for New York and western Massachusetts, Vermont and New Hampshire. I mean, this is not just going to be a coastal event. Why does New York really light up with heavy rainfall from the Euro model? I'll show you that in a little bit. GFS is a little bit farther east with the heaviest rain, but look how far inland that risk goes. And let's take a look at that Euro model. Watch what happens after it comes to the coastline. Then, as you go to Sunday night and Monday morning, look at how far inland it's going. That's that left turn that a lot of the models have been talking about, and it hangs out there until late Monday. It isn't until Tuesday that it finally starts to move to the east. So, Jackie, in the mountainous areas with a lot of trees and a slow-moving large tropical storm, we could be talking about a big-time inland flood event.
The long duration of that rain, Dr. Knapp, is just really, really concerning. Thank you so much for the update there. Coming up, Henri. It could become the first hurricane to make landfall in New England in 30 years since Hurricane Bob. So coming up, a refresher course on what you need to do now before the storm arrives. And be sure to stay with the Weather Channel for our live team coverage of Henri. Don't forget, you can download our app on your TV. Our coverage is available on Roku, Fire Stick, and your smart TV. Also, stick around. We're answering your hurricane questions live on the show straight ahead.
Imagine a visibly healthier pet in 28 days. Purina One, natural ingredients in powerful combinations for radiant coats, sparkling eyes. Purina One, one visibly healthy pet. Try these Purina One True Instinct formulas for dogs.
I was born the 4th of July. Grew some wings and learned to fly. Got a wind on my back just like I like. I said simplify.
The most populous city in America now in the bullseye for tropical storm impacts from Henri. The first time the National Weather Service in New York has had to issue this tropical alert in over a decade. Remember that? Irene was August of 2011. You might be asking yourself, hey, what about Sandy? Sandy was 2012. Well, you might remember Sandy was a post-tropical system by that time. So welcome back to Weather Underground, everybody. I'm meteorologist Jackie Jarris.
Hey, everyone, I'm Mike Bettis. We've got a lot to discuss here. And, knowing how many large cities now are in harm's way here, Jackie, how much rain is coming, how much storm surge is an issue, even winds, we want to give you every bit of information that we can about what's going on with this system, all right? So let's break it down for you, and including that kind of the stats that Jackie was referring to, right? The last time that we had tropical storm force winds was Irene back in 2011. Hurricane was Bob in 1991. So if we are to take a direct hit from a hurricane, to be the first one in 30 years, in essence. And by the way, the last time the National Weather Service in Boston issued a hurricane watch was a decade ago. So, Dr. Knabb, the return period here, if you will, is pretty infrequent, right? A decade plus in many of these instances. So we need a bit of a refresher course on what to do here and what's actually coming our way.
Yeah, and I really want to emphasize to the folks in the Northeast how important it is not to focus on exactly where the center is going to go. This is going to be a widening storm, even though it might weaken a little bit on approach, but still make it to New England as a hurricane. The winds and the water at the coast and inland are going to extend well beyond the center and well inland from the point of landfall. Now, let's talk about the storm itself. On the cusp of becoming a hurricane. In a little while, I'll show you what the various types of aircraft are doing out there. But clearly on the satellite, you can see the center of circulation with these low-level clouds is still on the northern side of the convection, but it is really bubbling. So this is poised to become a hurricane. And oh, by the way, with it this close to the east coast of the U.S., today is day number 1 of the high risk of rip currents and rough surf from Florida northward. Please be careful. The beaches only swim at guarded beaches. Might just want to stay out of the water while a hurricane is that close, even though the weather is good. Here's the trough, the cutoff low over the eastern U.S. that's pulling Henri to the north, and it's going to move northward over very warm waters tonight, tomorrow, and tomorrow night. It's not till Sunday when it reaches the cooler waters. Really got to be careful about how strong it could get. Could get stronger than forecast if it gets its act together overnight tonight and tomorrow night. And how strong it gets down here will have an effect on how strong it is when it gets to New England. But regardless, a Cat 1 hurricane or a tropical storm making landfall and then slowing down and becoming larger, that is all bad news. And we have till Sunday morning when the winds of tropical storm force and the heavy rains and the waves and the storm surge will be arriving. So, Jackie, tonight and tomorrow are prep time. You got to be in your safe place by tomorrow night.
That's right. Get everything done. You got tonight and tomorrow for sure. Well, the governor of Massachusetts is telling residents to stay home. And if you have plans to be at the Cape, delay it. The Weather Channel's Mike Seidel is live in West Dennis, Massachusetts, where they're getting ready for a storm like they haven't seen in decades. Mike?
Yes, again, we bring up Hurricane Bob. I was out here Labor Day weekend of '96. We had Edouard, but that went east of Chatham, east of the Cape, and not nearly the impacts that this may have with the surge. We're expecting a storm surge of up to 3 to 5 feet. We're under a storm surge watch and a hurricane watch on the Cape. The track has shifted west, but that doesn't get us out of trouble. Storm surge, also wind gusts as high as 40, maybe higher than 40 miles an hour, so we can't rule out at least some spotty power outages. Rainfall right now seems to be the lesser of the 3 evils between wind, rain, and surge. Today, though, a beautiful day. Here's the vista of where we're standing out here in West Dennis, and take a look. Blue skies, light winds on shore, water temp 75, plenty of sun. The beaches were packed. And this place is full. It is high season, so you expect the most people out here in July, and especially in August before schools go back on Labor Day. Not everybody was on the beach. Some were prepping ahead of Henri.
Well, since the storm is going to go in around Newport, Rhode Island, we're planning on leaving the boat in and we're going to tie down the lines, put more lines on her, more fenders, and we're going to weather out the storm. But if the track changes, we'll be pulling the boat either tomorrow morning or tomorrow afternoon.
We have multiple crews fanning out as we speak to keep you updated, to show you what's going on Long Island, coastal Connecticut and Rhode Island, the city of Boston, and right here on the Cape. Stay with us through the weekend for coverage.
So then I said to him, you ought to customize your car insurance with Liberty Mutual, so you only pay for what you need. Hot dog or chicken? Only pay for what you need.
Liberty, 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 liberty. When you order carry-out, choose Domino's Carside Delivery. Check in when you arrive, and we guarantee we'll be headed out the door less than 2 minutes after your order is ready. If anything slows us down, your next pizza is free. Put Domino's new 2-minute...
Named the world's most accurate forecaster, the Weather Channel.
Thanks for being with us here on Weather Underground as we follow Henri for you. A high-end tropical storm likely to become a hurricane, and it is threatening the Northeast. 70-mile-per-hour winds, north-northwest movement at 7. It will be taking aim Long Island, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, then coming interior Northeast. There's a look at the cone, right? As of right now, the center track would put over Long Island, New York, coming into Connecticut, Massachusetts, then Vermont, New Hampshire, and then Maine. Slowing down here, potentially coming in somewhere around Category 1 hurricane strength. They're slowing down, producing excessive storm surge, excessive rain, longer exposure to wind. So there are a lot of dangers for us here. And we've got tens of millions of people that will be in harm's way. So a lot happening for us right now. And Dr. Nab is with us tonight. Talk a little bit more about what the hurricane hunters are finding right now, Dr. Nab, because a lot of us are curious as when this may indeed become a hurricane.
Yeah, and you know those different types of hurricane hunter planes that we talk about, the NOAA G4 jet, the NOAA P3 that goes into the storm, the jet goes around, and the Air Force hurricane hunters that go in. We got all three in the air right now. We are so fortunate in this part of the world, really the only hurricane forecasting basin in the world that has this armada of aircraft. Now, that red line is the NOAA G4 jet flying around the storm, dropping the dropsondes, get the data into the models so that later tonight, those models can maybe get even more accurate, even better agreement. This is the NOAA P3 that has made one pass from south to north inside the storm. Here comes the Air Force C-130 that's about to go through. So we're really going to be able to monitor this closely for the next several hours. Now, the NOAA P3 that did that one pass from south to north did not find winds near hurricane force, but they probably haven't seen the strongest side of the storm on that right-hand side. So we'll have to see what they find and what the Air Force find. As the upper level outflow continues to get better defined, the low level center, though, is still on the north side, so it's still a little bit sheared, but that will be changing, Jackie. So I think this is poised to strengthen, and the airplanes are in there to tell us when it happens.
All right, we'll know soon. Thanks, Dr. Nab. Well, this summer, we launched the Pattern Earth Film Challenge, asking filmmakers to share inspiring stories about the issues facing our planet. Now, the winner gets a $10,000 grand prize, and their short film will air on the Weather Channel platforms. This week, we're counting down the top entries, and coming in at number 2 is the film Blue Ventures.
I'm trying to create a world in which people interact very differently with the ocean, in which people understand that taking less out of the sea actually gives everybody a huge amount more. The decline of fish stocks worldwide is a critical problem for livelihoods and for food security. About 97% of the world's fishers live in the developing world. These fish stocks are collapsing because of overexploitation, and with climate change, these problems are only becoming much more severe. Our work as an organization addresses the pressing problem by working with people that depend on the sea more than anyone else on the planet, some of the poorest coastal communities in Africa, and listening to them and understanding what the barriers are that they face when we talk about conservation.
In 2004, Blue Ventures encouraged residents in coastal Madagascar to try cordoning off a small section of their octopus fishing area for a designated period of time. When the area reopened, the community was surprised to discover what had happened.
Natao amizay moa isay igny voaloha tamin'ny 2004 sila nisoty voka sila ni maro. Lafa raha amizay ni maro nanao iaby koa tana hafa regny fa nahita soave raha igny.
So we use these very fast reproducing species that are important for local markets to demonstrate to communities recovering fisheries can be the best investment opportunity out there. We employ community members that we train to collect fisheries data on the catches that they're bringing out the water from one day to the next. This approach catalyses interest at a local level in conservation writ large.
Blue Ventures now works with communities to create mangrove, coral, and seagrass reserves on thousands of square miles of ocean. Along with training workshops and community exchanges, fisheries authorities in Madagascar, Mauritius, and Tanzania have adopted the model, with others in progress. Blue Ventures has also integrated family planning and maternal and child health into its work, impacting tens of thousands of coastal residents.
We need a whole new approach to the way that we get people talking about conservation by demonstrating in a very visible, immediate, and tangible way that conservation reaps dividends and gets people behind the movement, and that's what we can do.
I was fascinated. I hope you were too. Now, to see that full film and learn more about our finalists, head over to Pattern's YouTube page and Facebook page as well. In the meantime, let's get an update on Henri. Mike Seidel is live in Massachusetts. Mike?
Hey, Jackie, the sun is going down on what has been a spectacular day on the Cape, but we're under a hurricane watch and a storm surge watch. Impacts and timing, we'll get to that next here on the Weather Channel.
So just before the break, we saw one of the finalists in our Pattern Earth Film Challenge. Dozens of filmmakers responded when we put out the call for entries. And joining us now, one of the people tasked with narrowing down the field to those top few, Nate Mook, CEO of the World Central Kitchen. Nate, I'm sure this took you an extensive amount of time, but what exactly was it that you were looking for with these entries?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is finding that right balance, right? This is a film challenge that's not just about sort of the visual beauty or even just the story, but also really trying to impart some information, right? Trying to let the viewer really learn something in the process of watching the film. So, I think the key thing is really striking that right balance of, you definitely want it to be entertaining. Attention spans these days are really quite short. And so you want something that really grabs, the viewer and captures their attention right away. But you also want something that really kind of imparts a message, to learn something new or have a different perspective by the time they finish the film. At the same time, of course, it's very important to really have beautiful visuals. This film challenge was an opportunity when you're talking about climate and the impact of humanity on the planet, to really have some powerful imagery to support those messages. So again, I think it's really all about the balance.
Nate, were there certain films that just really caught your attention and you just said, wow, that's it?
Yeah, there were. I don't want to get into too many details of names. I know they're still being rolled out, and I don't want to give anything away. But absolutely. I mean, the films, there were. It was really interesting to see the different approaches that different filmmakers took. In terms of how they balanced the informational approach with some of the visuals and kind of linked those together, or featured characters that you would follow on a story and sort of see where those characters, how they sort of unfolded over the course of the film. And then, of course, there was sort of narrative. So, you had a narrator that sort of talked you through an issue and showed you different perspectives and hopefully, imparted a really strong message. So, I learned a lot watching these films, and I'm really excited to see all of the finalists announced and see who comes out the winner of this challenge.
So interesting, because I learned a lot, even just by watching some of the small clips. Honestly, I was surprised at the quality of some of these films. It's really impressive. I mean, these people are like professionals. Nate, what surprised you the most?
I think what was really interesting was the way that you're, looking at climate and climate change and the effect on the planet right now. I think you could have a very dark approach to this, right? And I think it was really amazing that the filmmakers were taking a very serious subject right now. I mean, this is something that we talk about all the time. This is World Central Kitchen's work. It's something that you talk about. We have a tropical storm, a hurricane headed to the Northeast right now. The planet is changing. We've got these big Category 5 storms. We have wildfires all over the world right now. The biggest single wildfire in California is still burning. Our teams are there. So you can take a really sort of like serious, dark approach to this. But I think what was amazing was to see how the filmmakers looked at solutions. They looked at, there are things that we can do. There's great ideas. It's going to take work and it's going to take time. And I think that's what surprised me, that most of the films were very uplifting, were very positive, were very, they weren't sort of dark and dismal, like we have to act now before the world perishes. But no, like, look, we are here and we have the power to make change. So let's do it. And I love that about these films.
Nate, we got about 30 seconds left, but I wanted to ask you, it seemed like there were a lot of younger filmmakers, and that's really a generation that this topic is so important to.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, it has been really amazing to see the technological advances in filmmaking to let younger filmmakers more affordably make beautiful cinematic films. And definitely, I mean, this is an issue that our younger generation is facing, and they're getting more engaged. So very exciting, and looking forward to see how the contest goes.
Nate, great to talk to you. Nate Mook, CEO of World Central Kitchen, one of our judges for our film extravaganza here. The films are fantastic. And Nate, thanks so much for being a judge and talking to us tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nate. Well, our live coverage of Tropical Storm Henri continues. Coming up next, we're going to break down all the threats and what you need to do now to prepare yourself for the storm, and why falling trees is a big concern.
Tonight on Weather Underground, Henri taking aim at the Northeast. New York City, Hartford, Providence, Boston, all in harm's way, with Henri strengthening and set to strike this weekend. Everything is on the table. Huge waves, storm surge, intense winds that will bring down trees and knock out power. Then there'll be flooding rain that could put neighborhoods underwater. And all of these things could happen well outside of where Henri makes landfall. So we're going to detail what you can expect and when.
As Henri nears, the time to prepare is now. We're going to show you the steps you can take to help protect you, your family, and your property. Plus, severe storms are ripping across the Midwest right now. See the spots where damaging winds, large hail, even a few tornadoes possible tonight could have you hunker down. It's all coming up next.
So much to cover for you here, and certainly we've got a lot of issues out there. We've got hurricane warnings, storm surge warnings in effect for a good portion of the Northeast here. A lot of population centers, unfortunately, and New York City in the cone now. So we have extended coverage for you. Welcome in, everyone. I'm Mike Bettis.
And I'm Jackie Jarrett. So we want to get right to our hurricane expert and the former director of the National Hurricane Center, Dr. Rick Knabb. Dr. Knabb, this puts almost all of the megalopolis in the risk and threat zone.
And a lot of interior New England into mountainous areas. We've got wind and water, coastal and inland issues to deal with starting Sunday morning up in the Northeast. Between now and then, Henri is expected to strengthen from the tropical storm that it is now to a hurricane. And we're sending everything we got at this. There in the red line is the NOAA G4 jet going around the storm, dropping dropsondes. The data will get into the models to hone in that track forecast tonight and tomorrow morning. This black line is the NOAA P3 that went into the storm, has done one pass at 5,000 feet, and the Air Force C-130 took off from Miami a little while ago. They're about to make their first pass at 10,000 feet. This jet's up at 45,000. So they're different altitudes. They're not going to run into one another, but they are all going to provide critical data. Now, the NOAA plane will be coming in from northwest to southeast, so we'll see how close to hurricane force winds that plane gets. And then the Air Force is going to be coming in from the west side, and we'll see if they get something close to hurricane force winds. And all that data will be slurped in by the Hurricane Center forecaster to put it out that intermediate public advisory within the next hour. We'll get an updated track and intensity forecast at 11 p.m. tonight. And this strengthening period is a critical period because the stronger it gets in here, and it could be stronger than forecast, the stronger it will get. Stronger will be when it gets to New England. But regardless, we're going to have a big, slow-moving tropical storm after landfall when the weakening occurs. We've got storm surge, winds, flooding rains going to affect a large number of people, Jackie.
So stay with us this hour as we break down all the threats and all the hazards. But first, people on the Northeast coast really not that accustomed to preparing for a hurricane. Watches and warnings have been posted now as Henri makes the turn up towards the north. Our Weather Channel's Mike Seidel is live in West Dennis, Massachusetts. And Mike, folks already have been working to get things like their boats out of harm's way.
We've seen some of that at the harbor, but the area is packed. It's teeming with tourists. This is high season on the Cape. Weather has been beautiful again today, 84 at Hyannis, and it's kind of muggy out here tonight. We're going to show you a beautiful sunset coming up in 30 minutes, and we plan to talk to the owner of this hotel to find out what he's planning to do. They've been through Bob. That was 30 years ago. That was the last big hit here on the Cape. Show you what it was like today. Here's the vista shot from above. Grab this from the 4th story looking across the area here where we're staying and out towards the water, which tonight is almost like a lake. That's going to change tomorrow night and Sunday in a big way. Meanwhile, a lot of folks on the beaches today. Beautiful day. 84 I mentioned. Kind of sticky. Plenty of sunshine. Water temp 75. That's about as warm as it gets this far north. But if you're thinking about coming or going to and from the Cape, well, the mayor of Boston, the governor of Massachusetts, Charlie Baker, had a few words and some suggestions earlier today.
The simple point here is we really would like everybody to be off the roads at the height of the storm, which will probably last all day Sunday and through until the early part of Monday. We don't want people to be stuck in the traffic on the Cape Cod bridges when the storm is in full force on Sunday.
Yeah, that's good advice. The surge is going to be the big issue. There may be a little bit of power going out, but if you're staying into next week, you're fine. Just, it's not going to be a good day certainly on Sunday to be out on the water or on the beaches. But if you're trying to get out here on Sunday, I would take his advice and put off your trip till the first of the week. In fact, hotels here are reporting folks calling in, canceling the reservations. Those are the ones that are expected, planning to check in on Sunday. So, Dr. Knabb, we're not going to get the direct hit, but again, we're on the east side of the storm. We're going to have some wind at least, but the surge is probably going to be the top impact with the wind, potential power outages number 2, and rainfall number 3 here on Cape Cod.
Yeah, east of track all the way out to the south-facing shores of the Cape there, Falmouth, Barnstable, Narragansett Bay, Buzzards Bay. That's where the storm surge is going to be the greatest in any of the storm. And big waves and the tropical storm force winds that could take out the power and take down trees. So you're going to feel it out there on the Cape. And you're on the east, stronger onshore flow side of the storm. Now, we want to talk about what the models are doing here and show you something beyond just the cone, because the cone doesn't tell you everything. It doesn't tell you what the size of the storm is going to be, but it does imply the slow motion, and I'll show you why the models are doing that. Because once the winds of tropical storm force and the heavy rain start on Sunday morning, they're going to last a while, and there are model differences in where the heaviest rain falls and how far inland the wind and rain impacts go. Look, for example, at the winds of tropical storm force. The chances go way inland because we have some models that take it pretty far inland, and also there are model tracks that are on either side of the exact track, and that's why this big area is under a storm surge warning, and the modeling is showing us how this wind field is likely to expand horizontally. That's why this area, if the center comes ashore anywhere in here, you're going to have that onshore flow in the waves, and you're likely to be on the right-hand side of this. So given all that, let's look at the GFS model. Watch how it grows in size as it approaches New England. And if this is exactly right or anything close to it, where Mike Seidel is will be on the stronger side, and the south-facing shores and bays will be getting pummeled by storm surge flooding and very high waves, damaging waves, and really strong wind, tropical storm conditions at least, going out all the way to the edge of the Cape and extending on the west side as well. So we got to not think about this as a point on a map or a line along a track. This is going to be a large beast that comes ashore initially, maybe as a hurricane, and then stays a tropical storm that is slow moving. And the GFS, the latest run, look how far inland and to the west that goes. Look at that, into New York. That's similar to what the Euro is showing, and this is into Monday. So this is going to be a long duration wind event. You're still going to have onshore flow and waves occurring even into Monday if this is right. So the longer that the winds occur, the longer that the waves and the storm surge occur, the more damage they can do, and the longer it sits over New England, the heavier the rain can be. It could take until Tuesday for this thing to get out of here, Jackie.
We got a full moon tonight, right? So that could exacerbate the situation. Let's talk more about some of these wind impacts, Dr. Knabb. You know, an expanding wind field as it's making landfall and getting closer means that we're going to have these wind impacts farther inland. So New York City now under the TS watch. How strong of winds could we be talking about, and what other impacts from these winds should we be concerned about?
Yeah, so much to unpack here. And what winds you get at your specific location, there are a lot of factors that play into that. Number one is how strong is the overall system when it gets to New England, and that is at least partially dependent upon how strong it gets tonight, tomorrow, and tomorrow night over the warm waters. That will have an impact on how strong it is when it arrives. That will be part number one of what factors into what strong winds you get. The other thing will be the expanding wind field. That will make larger the area that could get at least the tropical storm force winds, and that's why the hurricane warning is bounded by tropical storm watches and hurricane watches that could be upgraded to at least tropical storm warnings, and these don't extend as far inland as they might later. Look at how far inland the chances of tropical storm force winds are a lot more than zero. This could be a big inland wind event, at least with the effects of trees coming down and power being taken out for thousands, tens of thousands, maybe millions of you. And there's even the chance of hurricane force wind sustain. That's why the hurricane warning and watch, the watch goes all the way out to the Cape there. And again, the winds will start, along with the heavy rain, around the time the sun comes up on Sunday morning. And after that time, it will take a while for the winds to end because this won't be leaving until Tuesday. So we got to get ready for trees coming down, for the power going out, and for it to be really dangerous to be out and about on the slick roads, Mike.
Really all points well taken there, Dr. Knabb. We want to help you prepare for the storm. And sometimes we can go long periods of time between tropical systems hitting us, right? The last time we actually had watches and warnings issued by the Weather Service in New York was 2011, 10 years ago. So it's been a while since we've gone through this, right? So what do? Well, let's cover our windows and protect the glass with plywood, with shutters, all right? We do not want to use tape. That's not going to do you any good. In fact, what that can do in some instances is if your glass were to break and actually make the shards bigger, and you don't want that. Let's shelter like you would maybe a tornado, okay? We're all somewhat familiar with how to shelter for a tornado. We're either getting into the basement, we're getting to an interior room in our house on the first floor and staying away from the windows. That's the best thing that you can do. Unless there's flooding going on, you do not want to go down to your basement. Don't stay in a mobile home or an unsafe structure. Try to find a sturdy shelter. Don't be on the upper floors of a building. We have a lot of high rises. The higher up you go, the more exposure you have to wind. And consider leaving any unsafe structures and finding either a shelter to go to or maybe a friend or family member that has a sturdy shelter. Also consider if you lose power and you're operating a generator, what to do with that generator. Again, a lot of us maybe haven't used our generator in a while, right? Operate your generator outside only. Do not operate it in the garage. Do not put it inside your home, and make sure the exhaust for your generator is pointing away from your house. Don't use candles or open flames. Stay away from down power lines, at least 30 feet away. Call 911 if you have a down power line, and have a plan for life-sustaining equipment. So make sure you have a way to power that, or go to someone's location where they maybe have a generator that can power that equipment. All right, I want to take you to Atlantic City, New Jersey, and show you what's happening here. Not much right now, 77 degrees. As Mike Seidel was alluding to, it's a little muggy right now here in the Northeast. Here's the thing, Dr. Nab, we've got a lot of coastlines here that are exposed to water. There will be water effects here. Rip currents, storm surge, swells, beach erosion, you name it, we've got it.
Yeah, and I've said this multiple times this week, but it bears repeating that we have lost lives on many parts of the east coast of the United States in the past from rip currents and rough surf for hurricanes that churn up the ocean while that hurricane is on the other side of Bermuda from the United States. With Henri, it's going to be on our side of Bermuda and really close. This is really going to kick up the surf, and very high rip current risk, very high risk of rough surf all the way up and down the East Coast through the weekend. We got to be safe here, folks. We don't want to lose lives outside the cone and where the weather's good, because the ocean catches us in a false sense of security by the good weather that you might be experiencing, especially in the mid-Atlantic southward. But there's also going to be the direct impacts from the ocean. This is going to be a big hurricane and then tropical storm that's going to hang around for a couple days. And this storm surge warning, what does it mean? And it goes all the way to the south-facing shores of the Cape area, over to Falmouth and Barnstable, over to Buzzards Bay and Narragansett Bay. This area is under the danger of life-threatening saltwater flooding.